Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special podcast where we will break down the 25 under 25 for the 2022-2023 NBA season. And there is a little bit of some rules just to give people some context before they just go crazy, because these lists always tend to create a lot of animosity and you're an idiot, you're effing this, you're an effing that, because fans get passionate about their own guys. So the rules are, if you are 25 and under at the start of the next season. So guys like OG, Bam Adebayo, Time Lord, they did not make the cut by a few months. I think it's a stupid ass rule, but that's just me. Robert feels differently. I just feel like if you're from the same class, then you should be part of the list. But that's my opinion. But we're going by Robert's, and again, this is Robert's list. I'm reacting to it. This should be fun. A little bit of a different dynamic, right? Robert, go ahead.
Sure. Let's be real here for a second. I wanted to do January 1st as the cutoff, but you did not like that rule because under that rule, Darren Fox does not make the list.
Not just Jason Fox, like OG. Like, to me, the fact that OG is not on this list, that's my point though. Like, there by a few months doesn't make you like. My thing is, just because you're a few months older, that doesn't give you more upside. That doesn't give you more potential. You're literally from the exact same class.
Okay, so the second part of this list, and the way that I'm at least breaking this down, is sort of the way that Chad Ford thought about this list when he did it last year, which was trying to project who these players will be at 24. So if you see Cade Cunningham over Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that's not me saying that I think Cade's going to be better than Shai next year. It's not penalizing Cade for being younger, basically, or Evan Mobley. Right? I don't necessarily think if you stack them up today, if you were having a playoff series today, you're saying, who do you want right now, Evan Mobley or Jarrod Jackson Jr.? I think it's pretty easy to
But are you saying that you're projecting them to being better?
What I'm saying is every one of these players, the way I've leveled them out or the way I've ranked them is who I think they'll be at 24. Now, for a guy like Darren Fox or Jason Tatum, they're already 24, so there's no projecting. But for someone like Scotty Barnes, or someone like someone like Evan Mobley or Chet Holmgren or someone like that, you have to project a little bit based on who you think they'll be at 24. So there's a little bit of guesswork here. But if you're only going to rank who they are today, well, then the bottom of your list is all going to be the young guys.
Okay,
and the top of your list is the old guys.
So my big issue. Okay, so my big issue with these type of lists is always players don't stop growing or getting better at 24. I mean, that's...
No one said they are. No one said they are.
Right.
But this is the top 25, under 25.
Right.
So you're trying to level the playing field by saying, who will these players be? Now, we could go reverse and level the playing field and say, who were they at 20? So then now everyone's a 20-year-old. But that doesn't make any sense.
Why don't we just do, who will these new guys be at 24, and who will these 24 be at 27? That's more fair to me.
How is that fair? Because 27 is closer to your prime than 24. Nah, man. Like we're gonna.
No, I mean, yeah. These are your rules. I'm just saying how stupid it is. Just period.
Okay.
Period. Yeah. So
I disagree. Because look, when you like if I were to call up the Houston Rockets right now, right, and I was to offer them Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for their number 3 pick, chances are they might say no, right?
They will say no.
I'm giving you exactly. Now, are you telling me
wait.
any chance in...
The Thunder will say no.
Okay. Wait, what?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Forget the hypothetical. Think about last year. The Thunder were apparently dangling Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Cade Cunningham. They were.
Oh, right. But that's the number 1 pick, right? Though. And like Cade is one of the most hyped prospects we've seen in a while. Like, it's different. This year, there is no clear-cut number 1. So this draft is different.
Forget all that. What I'm saying is that, are you telling me
you can't forget all that?
Oklahoma City Thunder? No, but are you telling me that Oklahoma City Thunder thought that Cade Cunningham was going to be better than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last year? No. Right. So they are obviously projecting who these two players will be at 24.
But that's Cade Cunningham. I'm not doing that for Chet. I'm not doing that for Jabari. I'm not doing that for Banchero. I'm not doing that. That was
Cade
Cade
wasn't even.
Cunningham.
Forget Cade Cunningham. Cade wasn't even the best player in his draft class. What I'm saying is when you evaluate, like you do this all the time. You have this issue where like you're not seeing it as like you got to level the playing field somehow. You cannot compare 20. Like we had this whole debate about Gary Trent versus Jeremy Grant last podcast. You can't compare 23-year-olds to 28-year-olds the same way you cannot compare a 20-year-old rookie. Like you know how much Jalen Green's going to grow next year. Like, do you understand? Like,
But do
how
you
much better
understand that,
guy's gonna
like,
be?
but do you understand that players always plateau, and that if players always got better, then the NBA would be full of like superstars? But that's a reality that we all have to face and say, you will not be a superstar. You will be a superstar role player, and you will be content with that. If not, you're out the league. That's simple.
But that's the whole concept of drafting, right? Like you guys drafted, Davion Mitchell last year at 20, 22, 23 years old. Now, are you assuming that at 23 he's not going to be better than some guy like Johnny Davis coming out of the draft?
And that's why guys get fired. And that's exactly why NBA GMs get fired every single year, because they bet on potential as opposed to taking the guy that's NBA ready now, period. So Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, all guys I played junior, senior years. And you know what? Nobody cares.
Kevin Garnett,
nobody
Kobe
cares.
Bryant,
Like honestly, they're 4 years older or 3 years older than most of these guys. But guess what? When you become a superstar or an all-star or close to that level, nobody's saying, oh my God, he's 31 years old, as opposed to the guy that's Andrew Wiggins, right? Who is 4 years younger, but yet hasn't done shit with his life until maybe now, where he's now in a incredible situation. So that's my point. You don't always, and that's why guys get fired, bro, because guys get fired on potential.
Upside is not like, it's not exact science, right? There are exceptions to every rule. There are guys who picked up basketball late. So someone like Pascal Siakam came out, he was like 22 at the time of the draft. A lot of people penalized him for being 22 because he's now going up against
which
guys
is
who are
asinine.
19.
Which is asinine to me.
But it's not.
But it is because Siakam is an All-NBA close to level player now. That's why it's asinine.
Okay, but that's it's asinine if you don't take in the context that he's playing in a mid-major conference. It's asinine if you don't take account the fact that he picked up basketball at 18. Okay, now we have some context and say, okay, well, this guy, okay, he's 22, which means, yes, he's playing against 19-year-olds in college, which means he should be dominating those guys. I mean, you played high school basketball, right? Mm-hmm. If you put the senior team against the freshman team, you cannot say that that's even, right?
Of course not.
Like if I'm a senior killing freshmen, so that's my point. Even in college, 22-year-olds have very different bodies than 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds. So if you're a 22-year-old dominating not always, fine. You can say Chet Holmgren right now. He's a year older than most.
I think when you're 14, wait. It's way different. I think when you're 14 and a freshman, it's way different than when you're 16, 17 as a senior, bro. Completely different. As opposed to being 19, 22. Because when you're 19, 22, guess what? You're pretty much already developed. Like, you pretty much have
You're not.
But you are, though.
You're not even close, man.
Have you looked at the kids coming out? No, wait. But have you looked at the kids coming out? Class of 27, 2029. These guys are doing 360s. Shit that none of us were ever doing back then. That's my point. There's a big difference.
Go look at Giannis.
I know, but it's 2022 though. But it's 2022 now.
Like, forget 2022. We're talking about like
I can't forget that.
Look.
I'm literally looking at it, bro. I'm looking at it every single day, going to the gym, seeing 16-year-olds doing 360s. That used to be an anomaly. Guys are doing it. But everyone's doing it now.
We're not talking about vert. DeMar DeRozan dunked in grade 8. We're not talking about vert. We're talking about grown man
Anyone
strength.
can dunk. Anyone can dunk. I'm saying these kids are supremely athletic.
It's not even about athleticism. It's about skill set. It's about 4 years more of coaching, man. Like, Obaji, perfect example in this draft. How much better has he been since a freshman to senior? Now, is it fair to now, because he's a four-year player now, just won a national championship. Is it fair for me to compare him to Chet Holmgren, who's a freshman? Is that fair? Is it fair to say, well, because Obaji is more polished as a 4-year player than Chet Holmgren? Like, you have to project that way. You can't compare Drew Timme to Chet Holmgren and say, well, Drew Timme's a better player. Yeah, because he's huge. He's a grown man. Like he's a grown man. Like Rafael Arujo, right? Rafael Arujo, BYU. Like look at his stats in college, but he was a 24-year-old senior dominating 18-year-olds, and the Raptors fell for that, and they drafted this bust who was out of the league in 2 years. That's what I'm saying. You cannot compare guys who are 24.
I can flip the script on you as well, and like every team that has drafted a 19-year-old that has literally been a bust. There's so many of them.
But that's not defeating the point. What you're saying is that those teams did a bad job of developing. Maybe they did a bad job of scouting. Maybe the kid just didn't want to get better. Maybe he got money too early. Look, all of that being said, there are guys like Herb Jones in every draft who slip through the cracks. People think they write them off because they don't have upside, because they're too old, etc. And they end up being great. There are a lot of guys who went to college for 2-3 years and they were awesome. My point is, you have to take that into account when you're measuring them up against freshmen. And as if I'm comparing a freshman who's 18, or if I compare a guy like Shaedon Sharpe, who's a freshman from the 2023 class who reclassified to 2022, I cannot compare him against a guy who's a senior. That would be ridiculous. Because now you also can't say, well, because he didn't play, he's suddenly better than the senior. You can't say that either. That's why you get paid the big bucks as a GM, because there has to be some level of projection and guesswork there. And you can say that's why people get fired. But imagine being the GM that passes up on a Shaedon Sharpe for a more proven commodity, and Shaedon Sharpe ends up being like the best player in this draft in 2 years. Now you also lose your job. So it's a catch-22. You got to play it both ways. But I think the best organizations like the Raptors, they make calculated gambles. They have gambled on seniors, like Fred VanVleet, 4-year player of Wichita State. They've gambled on Malachi Flynn, right? That's a more like, a 3-year, 4-year college player. But they also took a gamble on a freshman like Scotty Barnes, right? But they didn't gamble on Scotty Barnes saying, hey, Scotty Barnes as a freshman was better than Chris Duarte as a senior. They projected and said, look, Chris Duarte is 24 years old now. Scotty Barnes is 20. We believe that at age 24, we'll get him past this guy. And that's why you pick Scotty Barnes. But if Scotty Barnes was 24 and Chris Duarte was 20,
I agree 1,000%
you cannot have that same argument.
But that has nothing to do with making a list, and again, acting like these 24-year-olds won't get better, or that I wouldn't take Shea. That I wouldn't take Shea over Cade. That is asinine. I would take Shea 10 out of 10 times over Cade any day, whether you rank him higher than Shea or not. Like that's why so many people laugh at these lists, because they're just asinine.
Well, look at the lists in 10 years and see how they turned out. Let's get to the list. I mean, speaking of the list, let's get to the list.
So just start from the bottom.
Oh, geez. Okay. So now we've given up the list. We've given away the list, unfortunately.
Okay.
But just
okay. So the first one is 25, Desmond Bane. That way we're just going in and out.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I think there's a case again, like there's a player who has sort of hit his upside in terms of, I don't want to say hit his upside as in he can't get better, but there's a limited upside in terms of what you're going to get with Desmond Bane. But what he is an excellent fit next to Ja Morant, playing in a winning team, second team in the West, playing major minutes, a really big part of why the Memphis Grizzlies were able to tread water without Ja Morant. I question the defensive upside. Wingspan, size, there's a lot of projecting going there. But, he could climb higher on this list. I just, I think the value of three-point shooting is obvious in the NBA, and he's probably projecting to be one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. I'd like to see a little bit more on-ball creation, potential, portability, a lot of that stuff. But I love what I saw this year, and I'm really happy that Ja Morant gave him his most improved player.
I'm not mad about it, but I would have had Miles Bridges over him. I know you have Miles at 26, RJ at 27, and Tyler Hero at 28. I would have swapped Miles for Desmond, but that's just me. So at number 24, you have Tyrus Maxi.
Yeah, so I think Offensive potential off the charts. Defense highly overrated. I mean, he's got that long wingspan, so a lot of people see him, and there's certain guys who just pass the eye test as defenders. You see the long arms, you see the quick, and you're like, man, this guy's a good defender. But the metrics do not like him as a good defender. He's not a good defender, and I think but he's a really hard worker. Super quick. The shot was incredible. Super efficient offensive player. Um, Probably more of a two guard in a lot of ways. So it's probably a blessing. It's like undersized two guard playing with James Harden as kind of an on ball creator point guard. I like his potential. I could see anywhere from, a very, very, very poor man's Ja Morant type of player type, all the way down to a Jamal Crawford type, right? Where you have both those angles, and probably falls somewhere in the middle, veering more towards the Jamal Crawford type. But he could get a lot better. He's 21, 22 years old, right? It's 21. So I mean, there's a lot of room to grow there.
At number 23, you got Ayton.
Yeah, I mean, one of the older guys on this list, if I'm not mistaken, 2024. Um, I just don't value centers, and you'll probably see that at the top of this list. You have a lot of guards, a lot of forwards, not a lot of big men, and I think that the big men who really have impacted. I mean, if we're looking at a small sample size, which is the playoffs, I think you're seeing the big men who are like, who's the tallest guy left, right? 6'8" Kevon Looney, 6'8" Rob Williams. It's like these long, switchable guys. I don't really trust Ayton to be covering on guards. I think drop coverage is going to die as three-point shooting. I like teams that can switch to drop, but the ideal big man going forward, especially if you're talking about a list as primo as this one, um, you're talking about a guy effectively who can both drop and switch on to guards. So, to be honest, someone like Precious Achiuwa probably projects a little bit better. There are some more mobile big men on the list, and I just don't think like post scoring like what Ayton does. So I think Ayton's evolution is going to come down to him being able to stretch the floor a little bit, and being able to get a little bit quicker out there. But I don't really see the upside.
My Doberman is going crazy. I have no idea why. I have headphones on. Okay, at number, where are we at? At number, what are we at? 22. Darren Fox. Here we go.
All right.
Here we go.
Oh,
Go
man.
ahead, man. Go ahead.
Look, like Fox, you're talking about an 88th percentile type of offensive player, right? In terms of load, in terms of on-ball creation, downhill gravity, obviously excels in transition. He's one of the older guys on this list, probably the oldest guy who made this list. I just don't see. I think we've seen 4 years now of Fox, right? If I'm not mistaken, it's 4 years.
5.
Got that big contract. 5 years. We're going into
Right.
that, 2017 draft, right? So now this is 5 full years, no playoffs, right? Now we can argue, is it the coaching? Is it the team around him? But there are a lot of guys out there, analytically at least, who have outshone him in worse situations. Not to name names, but guys like Anthony Edwards last year, we were already seeing that upside with him, and we were seeing it translate to winning. Towards the end of the season, Minnesota really did start to pick up as Edwards got better, his team got better, right? I get wary about guys who put up 24, 25, 26, 28 points per game, and their team doesn't budge. So I started to dig a little bit further into Fox's analytics, and I saw where the struggles were coming from. So defense, he's a bottom 1% defender. Now you have cited before that when he dials in, it's like wow, and I think this might be a little bit more of that Tyrese Maxi effect, where he's really quick and he's twitchy, and you see spurts of it, but unless you commit yourself to that end of the floor, I think, if the motor runs hot and cold, or if the offensive load is just too much and he's kind of conserving himself defensively, then I think that has to be factored in, especially for a guy who's not a rookie anymore. He's his fifth year, and if defense is still a question mark, and he's a bottom 1% defender in his fifth year, which is, by the way, 2 years beyond when guys usually figure out how to play defense at the NBA level. I think year 3 is when the light bulb clicks on for a lot of players. I worry about the upside of having a one-way player. Now, in terms of top-end potential of what I see Darren Fox, do I see, a downhill gravity version of what Trae Young is? No, because even though they're both pretty horrific defenders, Fox obviously being the bigger, more athletic version of Young, there's also a diminished value when you're swapping out a guy who's an excellent paint finisher for a guy who's an incredible playmaker and shooter. Whereas analytics probably prioritize one 1,000 times more than the other. So I think that the lack of shot, his shot quality is terrible, by the way. If you look at LeBron, like all the analytics say, shot quality for De'Aaron Fox is like bad. In
But
terms
that
of
stat
first option,
again, but that stat doesn't take into account who his surrounding cast is and how they get that offense, and like how bad he's been put. Again, you are what your coaching staff puts you in terms of situations, man. And that's where I hate when people cherry pick with like analytics and there's no context to the actual offense. So unless the analytics show me that he was surrounded with a bunch of bums and a bunch of bum coaching staffs, then we can talk. Luke Walton honestly got the job because he's a white privileged player who other guys have not gotten second opportunities. That's a fact. And carrying the Walton name carries a lot of weight in the NBA. I don't understand how Vlade could fire Dave Yeager after getting them to 39 wins, which is the most since 2006. The team was heading in the right trajectory. Fox would be looked at a lot differently right now by you and by a lot of people. But what does he decide to do? He decides to fire him because they needed to take the next level. And guess what? What happened the following year? They took 2 huge steps back. So those are the things that analytics don't take into account.
Here's something that I think is worth mentioning, right? If you take the ball out of this guy's hands, right? And I'm not suggesting you do that, but if you did, his value goes down so much.
100%.
Because so much of his value is with the ball in his hands.
Because he can't shoot the 3-point shot.
Because he can't space. So there's no portability in terms of fitting him in next to a guy who's
But he's a
dominant.
great mid-range shooter, though. A great one.
He's not great.
He shoots 48% on super high volume.
48% on mid-range shots is not an efficient shot in the NBA.
All the elite players, all the elite scorers in the playoffs especially, I mean, you're referring to the actual season. That's fine. But in playoff basketball, that is a shot that the elites actually get and that score at a high efficient rate. We've seen it every single year for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Well, let me explain my perspective on this. Mid-range shooting should be, in terms of a shot spectrum, I'm talking like holistically in terms of modern offenses, should be your last resort. It should be something you can go to. It should be where it's
not if you're an elite player.
But no, because we've seen over.
You disagree.
Dude, look,
I've spoken to so many NBA coaches that disagree 1,000% with you. 1,000% with you.
Because they're old.
Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant. I mean, all these dudes
Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant are elite.
Chris Paul.
Okay, you're missing my point. I'm not saying the mid-range shot is a bad shot. I'm saying that to live in an offensive system in which mid-range is your first option is a bad way to go. And with someone like Darren Fox, with someone like Scotty Barnes right now, with someone like Evan Mobley, where the three-point shooting is not a threat, teams are playing you to take mid-range shots because they know that you can't. Look, consider it like this. You're card counting at the Vegas table, right? I know that an NBA offense cannot consistently beat me in a 7-game series by generating fewer than 1.08 points or 1.06 points per possession. That means that if you don't shoot 54% from mid-range, that's a shot I'm willing to live with. So if you tell me 48%, guess what 48% on mid-range shots results in terms of points per possession? Results in 0.98. 0.98 is well below a league average. So if you want to take mid-range shots, Bam Adebayo, you want to take mid-range shots, Scotty Barnes, you want to take mid-range shots, Darren Fox, be my guest. Because I would much rather surrender that mid-range shot to you than give up an open corner three. Now, that's what I'm talking about. Now, when the corner threes are blocked, the mid-range shot from a superstar, like a Kawhi Leonard, like Kevin Durant, acts as a release valve, okay? So that a guy can be pushed off the line and still step into 21 feet. Now, that's a great shot when it's a last resort. But you ask Kevin Durant...
What's a better shot, though? A mid-range shot or an actual drive to the basket?
No, the drive to the basket is always the functional best shot ever because no one is ever...
Right.
Look, that's where...
Again, context matters. If you have shooters around Darren Fox, there's not a soul in the NBA that can stop Fox going to the rack. Not one. Not one. So if he has spacing, again, this is the context that I'm referring to. If he has spacing, there's not one person that can stop him. That's my point.
So you are right in that Darren Fox, basically, to me, is like a very, very, very small Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Right.
That's my comparison for him. But
with elite shot creation, though, like he can create a shot whenever he wants. Elite handle, way better passer.
Oh my God. Okay, first of all, Giannis just literally dissected the Phoenix Suns in the finals against triple teams and averaged 40. You are not telling me that he's better than him.
Giannis is also 7 feet tall and like 260 pounds.
Yeah, but you're not taking that away from him. What I'm saying is, if Giannis was 6'4", 6'5" instead of 7 feet, and if Giannis, Giannis has shown some impressive, numbers on the mid range this year. A great deal of improvement this year. We've seen it, and we have seen so much better passing from him over the last 3 years after Nick Nurse did what he did to him. Okay, so if you take away Giannis's defense, which is, by the way, all-world defense, and you take away his height, and you take away a lot of his strength, and you retain his ability to finish in the paint, but you diminish it a little bit because while De'Aaron Fox is great at finishing in the paint compared to every other guard in the NBA, no debate here. You think he's like 56 or 57% close to the basket. That's a good shot. By the way, that's a great shot. But if you want to unlock that, you have to either have elite passing and elite shooting around him. He's not an elite passer. He's a very good passer.
He's a very good passer.
If he's a very good passer, what's Scotty Barnes?
A very good passer.
Okay, well, I'm not running an offense through Scotty Barnes right now either. So that's my point. So it's like you can't. You want to run this heliocentric type of offense around him.
So what do you consider a great passer? Guys who like put up Westbrook,
Luka, LeBron, Ben Simmons, Trae Young. That's the benchmark. Anything less than that, I'm sorry.
I guess, yeah.
You cannot.
Those are cerebral players, though.
Okay, but okay, maybe Ben Simmons aside, because Ben Simmons is greatly diminished by his inability to shoot, much like Fox is. But if you look at it that way, what is Ben Simmons' value right now? He's an elite paint finisher, great passer, incredible defender, and his league value is not great because he can't shoot. Look, man, you take the shot out, like Darren Fox shot 28% from three last year. This is not a steady improvement. We're not seeing like a guy who went from 18 to 25 to 27 to 32 where there's like, oh, he's getting better every year. This is a consistent
check
problem.
How much he scored from three once the Bones got there. 38% on 6 attempts. It's possible, bro. Like it's there. And that's the thing where I'm like certain guys that can't do it, and there are guys who are capable of doing it. And when you're capable of doing it, that means there's a chance that you can reach that. And with the right coaching, it's gonna happen though.
Okay, so
Trae Young will never be Trae Young will never be a actual good defender. Never.
Okay, that's fine. But both Trae Young and De'Aaron Fox have something in common. They're both bottom 1 percentile defenders.
And the difference is that one guy can actually become a very good defender with the right culture. with the right coaching staff and with the right players. No matter
Sure.
what
I
you do
mean,
with Trae Young, that's my point here,
look,
though. So when
you
you
know,
talk about potential, that has to
mhm.
be like that has to be included, man. Because
One
all
of the
this shit
things
is
that I,
like all this shit is literally make believe anyway. Like you're literally guessing and you're projecting. So if I project that if Fox is capable of being elite, then what are we saying right now? Like you can't pick and choose just because a guy is 19 or 20 and say, well, he could be Rudy Gobert on steroids. He could be. Fox could be. So don't pick and choose could be's. They're all could be's at the end of the day.
yeah,
Literally.
but one guy you have way more. Okay, look, let me give you an example. Let's say you get a chance to meet somebody for 25 meetings, right? Let's say you have 25 meetings. You get to ask them whatever questions you want, observe them for 25 meetings. And then you have another guy where you've only met him for one meeting. You have way more information on the guy you've had for 25 meetings, right? So,
Sure.
whereas if you had projected Jason Tatum at age 20, where would he be at 24? You would be wrong because he has exceeded that. If you
Without
projected
question.
Luka if you projected Luka at 20 and see where he is at 23, you would probably be wrong. I don't think anyone was expecting him to be MJ level offensive player in the playoffs. That he had to show that. Okay, otherwise he would have been the number one pick. If you had projected someone like DeAndre Ayton at 20, you would be wrong on the other side because you were definitely expecting him to be a lot better than what he's become.
Not me.
So I'm
Go
saying,
ahead.
okay, not you, but a lot of scouts who saw him as the number one pick in that draft. Marvin Bagley, not to put a sour point on this, but also a guy who has vastly underperformed what people thought he would be. Now, even you could not have
Not
expected
me.
Marvin Bagley to be that bad. You thought he was going to be like the 30th
No,
best player in that draft.
I
Okay,
didn't.
most people who were down on Bagley saw him as like the fifth best player in that draft, not the 30th best player in that draft. He's been abysmal. So when I look at someone like that, I'm like, okay, so you had 30 college games or 10 college games or 15 college games, a couple of pro days, workout, and that's the sample size. But with Darren Fox, you have 5 NBA seasons, bro. You have to be able to make a more informed decision about this guy. What I'll tell you this. I watched Deandre Fox, Tyrese Halliburton. I saw that whole Kings iteration. And then I saw the different iteration with Domantas Sabonis. Now, whereas you are correct that Sabonis has really unlocked Fox's shooter, and, even though it's not super high volume, you're 38%, it is there that the efficiency has gone up. I'll tell you, though, that it's very interesting to realize that you're talking about a 5-out offense, and you get a guy like Sabonis who operates in the paint, clogging up the exact space that Fox needs. And then the other side of
It
it
worked real
is
well, though. Tell you that much. And do you
didn't
know
result
why?
in a play-in.
But do you know why it? Well, they both got hurt. But do you know why it actually worked well? Because when you're playing a pick and roll, if you're able to shoot the mid-range shot, then it's gonna work. That's my point. He's never played. Well, Bagley was supposed to be Sabonis, right? That's why they drafted him. Some people think, oh, well, they passed on Luka because of the fit and what Bagley could have been. There we go again, projecting players. That didn't happen. He did not become Sabonis. He was a bum from the start. He's still a bum today. So when you don't add a guy that can actually command guys that can converge on you on the roll, like Sabonis does, then guess what? That puts more pressure on your star player who you never surrounded him with the right pieces. And that's my point
Dude,
when I say culture matters, organization matters, GMs matter, context matters. And some analytics can't show that. And that's a fact. That's not an opinion. That is literally a fact.
yeah, well, you know what also is a fact? That the league average for three-point shooting goes up. Every 5 years, it goes up. People get better at shooting threes, and 3 points will always be worth more than 2 points. So
Sure.
you can perfect your mid range all you want, your mid range pick and roll, your pick and pops, whatever. Unless you start finding players who are able to shoot that shot in the mid range contested against playoff defenses at
So
a higher clip than
as the
55%.
GM, right? As a GM, as your
Mhm.
organization, isn't that your job?
Your job is to space the floor and find shooters who can then unlock uncontested mid-range shots, because that's what, basically you want to. The healthy shot diet is that look, most modern defenses are geared to give up mid-range shots with a light contest. What they are gearing up to do really is to drive shooters off the line from the three-point shot, because most modern defenses have figured out what some old school GMs haven't, which is that 3 points is worth more than 2 points. Now, I'm not one of those analytics only guys. I understand the value of mid-range. Obviously, I'm a Raptor fan. I saw Kawhi literally shoot mid-range shots up until a championship, but he did that with 3-point shooters around him, like Danny Green, like Norman Powell, and so. But he also shot incredibly well. Like, he shot.
But DeMar DeRozan, DeRozan has never been known to be a 3-point shooter, and he just had an MVP caliber year, not being a 3-point shooter though.
But he didn't, and that's my point. So the numbers do not lie on DeRozan. The advanced stats hate this guy. They have always hated him.
And is he a good player or not?
Overrated. Super overrated. Unbelievably overrated. People, dude, we saw it. What are you talking about here? Look, let me put it this way. You hate advanced stats. Or it seems like you hate advanced stats.
I don't.
The way you talk about them, right?
I don't.
But you don't like guys who talk about advanced stats without contextualizing, right?
I like good players. I think DeRozan's a hell of a player. I think Fox is a hell of a player.
Let me put it this way. I look at teams, I look at narratives and I look at teams. Now, I understand narratives are driven by the media, and media is sometimes a little bit stupid when it comes to actually observing the game that they're watching. And I think coaches, scouts, GMs probably a little bit better at it, but still not great. Like we are really in a new age of basketball where there's so much information flying at you, like what metric means what, and all this tracking data that we're seeing. Like, Scotty Barnes is second in the league in distance traveled on defense. Does that mean he's the best defensive player or the worst defensive player? I don't know what that means, right? So without context, you need to understand like what this stuff means. I'll tell you, the Chicago Bulls had a super light schedule to start the year. They jump up to the number 1 seed in the East, and everyone is blowing the shit up out of proportion. DeRozan is like, an MVP candidate. And what happened? The schedule got harder, and Lonzo Ball got injured. And one of the things that the analytics showed that the narrative did not was that Lonzo Ball, when healthy, was the second best defender in the NBA this year. Okay? That's what the analytics showed. That per defensive LeBron, he was literally second in the NBA. So when you take that guy out and your entire rating falls off, it's not, oh, DeMar DeRozan is having a bad season now. It's that he was being like artificially propped up as the reason for the success when in fact he wasn't. Because I guarantee you, if DeRozan had gotten hurt instead of Lonzo Ball, it would have actually hurt the Chicago Bulls less, because you could have had Zach LaVine fill in a lot of what DeMar does.
Zach LaVine was literally injured though.
But that's my point. It's like you look at someone like Lonzo Ball, and his numbers are not sexy, right? It's like sometimes he's like got like 8 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and you're like, damn, like we paid how much money for this? But the advanced metrics show that this guy is literally buying you wins every time he's on the court. He's putting up like incredible, but not box score numbers, but his on-off splits show the impact that he has as a communicator, as a passer, as a guy who just facilitates the offense. And there are just certain guys like this that analytics just show where traditional box scores don't. And so when people start to say like DeMar DeRozan without a jump shot, without a 3-point shot is, the super efficient scorer, and he's perfected who he is. And we have seen for 10 fucking years now who he is fail over and over and over and over. And we've seen Chris Paul fail over and over. And it's like, God damn it, these guys are the perfect versions of what they are. And it always fails. It always fails in the biggest moments. Why? Because when that floor shrinks and you don't have the threat to go out and shoot a 28-foot shot, look at every guy who ever outperformed his regular season in the playoffs. We're talking Luka. We're talking even guys who maintain steady performance. Dame Lillard. Like, when you talk about big playoff performers, what do they have that these classic quote-unquote chokers don't? A 3-point shot. So in the modern NBA, if so many teams are taking threes, and you're going to be the old school
Giannis
guy
literally
who's like,
just
yo,
won a championship not taking threes. And he was literally
okay,
considered a choke artist and a non-Batman before everything went well for the damn Bucks, before KD's
look
foot
at the team around him.
before KD's foot was on the line. And I wasn't that guy because I'm Giannis' biggest fan. But I'm saying the narrative was he's not a Robin. Let's put Dame around him. Sorry, he's not a Batman. Let's put Dame. Let's put all these star point guards around him. Why? Because he can't shoot the shot. And what did he do? He said, all you motherfuckers, like, let's go win a championship.
Giannis
That's
is
the
literally
difference.
Shaq.
Call it
So
call it an anomaly. It's fucking possible, though.
Okay, and what did Giannis do this year without Chris Middleton? He got bounced in the second round. So
To your Celtics, who is historically a great defensive team. That's like
they are.
You act like they lost to some fucking bums.
They didn't lose to bums.
Exactly, and they lost in 7.
But
like,
look,
what are we saying?
Dude, look at the roster building around Giannis. You have to have a historic 3-point shooter at the center, like Brook Lopez, who's like shooting incredible percentages.
That's my point. It's the GM's job to put the best players around your star player. Some the Kings haven't done in 5 years for Darren Fox. Some they never did with DeMarcus Cousins.
So
go ahead.
We can end this. We can end this De'Aaron Fox thing by saying, look, if you are saying that the Kings have not put the right team around Fox to succeed, I agree with you. What I'm not agreeing with you is that Fox is the type of guy that you should be building a roster around. I don't think that he's the guy that you should be like literally tailoring your entire offense. Like, okay, we got to swap out Holmes, we got to swap out Harrison Barnes, we got to swap out this guy, we got to trade Tyrese Halliburton, we got to draft this guy because they fit in with Fox. Because the one thing that Giannis gives you that Fox does not is defensive player of the year upside. Now, if Fox were any one of the following things plus what he already is, I would agree with you. Because he's young and he's extremely talented and physically gifted. If he was a lockdown defender, which he is not.
Which he can be.
He cannot be. A lockdown defender, we're talking Marcus Smart level lockdown defensive player of the year. We're talking first percentile defender.
You don't have to be that. Like, you don't have to be that.
No, man. What I'm saying is you don't have enough. It's like a watermark, right? With Giannis, if you take away his defense, he's no longer worth building around. That's not enough. You can't just be a non-jump shooting, post playing, rim running big man who doesn't play defense. Ben Simmons, same thing. Ben Simmons is not worth building around, period. But like you look at a guy like Giannis, you take one part of that out, he's not Giannis anymore. If he's not a historical defender, if he's not an efficient post player, if Giannis just couldn't score, if Giannis just could not score, if he had not found a way to score so efficiently from the post and on drives and in transition, if he was just a zero on offense, you could not build a championship team around him. You'd be playing 4-on-5.
Agreed.
So my point is that if you're going to build around a guy like De'Aaron Fox, which, if I'm looking at the Kings roster right now, which they have decided to do. I mean,
5 years in! 5 years in! And now he's perceived...
You gave him a max contract.
And fuck, you had to. It's just like the housing market. You are what the market says you are. Period. If you think this house is worth $400,000, guess what? If they're asking $500,000, you're gonna give them $500,000. That's just the way it is, brother. That's just.
I mean,
if the Kings don't give him a wait. If the Kings don't give him a max, guess what? Someone else would have, and that's just the way it is.
I don't know about that.
Stop it. Before this last season, every team in the NBA would have given him a max contract. Every team.
Not every team could have given him a max contract.
That's my point. But every team that could have would have given it to him.
Okay, sure. But
of course. Again, why? Because he was 23. Because he was 23 and he was coming off of what? 25-7 season. You pay that man a max contract because you're what? You're projecting, right? Right?
But you pay it because you're the Knicks. You pay it because you're the freaking Knicks.
God. You're paying it because you're the Raptors. You're paying because if you have the money, You're going to pay
Toronto
this
Raptors
man.
would never.
Oh
The Toronto
my
Raptors would
God.
never, ever, ever pay De'Aaron Fox a max. Are you kidding me? This
They're
team
about to pay
prioritizes
Van
two-way
Vliet a max.
They're not going to pay Van Vliet a max.
If you
They're not
to
gonna pay Van
me, if you make over $23 million, you're pretty much a max player contract.
Van Vliet makes $19 million, $20
right,
million.
but you said on this next contract he's gonna make over $23 million. I'm
He's
not
probably
paying
gonna
that
make
much.
25.
There you go.
Okay, but you can argue all you want, dude. But what I'm saying is what De'Aaron Fox.
Would
like,
you rather
what
pay
Van
Fox
Vliet
25
has,
or would you rather pay Van Vliet 25? Stop it. Go ahead.
What? But
Don't
once again,
even start.
if,
Oh my God, I can't with you, bro. Really?
dude, you are
Really?
talking about one of. Okay, let me put it this way. I don't
Oh
like
my
Van Vliet. You know that,
Lord.
right?
Oh
You-
my
whoa, 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 whoa.
God.
You understand that I do
I'm
not
gonna
like
email
Van Vliet,
Messiah
right?
right now and I'm gonna be like, real talk, drop the bullshit, Messiah. Who are you picking at $25 million a year? Hands down. He's gonna laugh at me like, why are you asking me this? And he's gonna hang up, be like, yeah, Fox, duh.
I think you and I have a very big disagreement on the value of 3-point shooting. 39% 3-point shooter and a good defender for a guy who's bottom 1%
midget?
defensive. Okay, come on.
Who
Come
can't
on.
finish at the rim? Who you always criticize for? Who like?
Yeah,
Who
I
has
agree.
no
I
moves
agree.
to like?
But
Oh my God.
if you like, both of them are decent-ish passers. Okay, I don't agree with you that Fox is a good, Scotty Barnes level passer, whatever. But we can agree to disagree on that. But
He averages 7 assists a fucking game with a bunch of bums.
But I mean, come on.
He would average
You
10
can
assists
say-
a game if guys would hit at least like 10% more of their shots.
Dude, at some point you got to realize that if you're a guy with the ball and everyone around you is classified as a bum, you're a big reason why they're classified as a bum. Harrison Barnes started on a team that won 73 freaking games, and he's a better player today than he was back then. Rashawn Holmes is a good player, okay?
Rashawn Holmes didn't play most of the year last year.
Domantas Sabonis, okay, tell me this. You told me last year that you thought Domantas Sabonis and Pascal Siakam were basically even
Right.
as players, right?
Right.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Fred VanVleet basically won with Pascal Siakam missing quarter of the season. He got his team while hobbled, OG missing half the season. Like, are we saying that the coaching gap between the Raptors and the Sacramento Kings is just so big?
It's so big.
Or maybe
It's so big.
Man,
It's
let me tell you
so
something.
Nick Nurse is
This
a
is-
top 5 coach in the game. Stop it.
If you replace Fred VanVleet with Darren Fox on the Kings last season, y'all make the playoffs. I'm gonna tell you that right
God.
now. You would. You really are not looking at projected wins, man. De'Aaron Fox is
to me.
dude. De'Aaron Fox is a negative player, dude. Like, you're not seeing this, but I am telling you, he averaged negative wins this year. Negative.
You put Nick
negative
Nurse
box
with
plus
De'Aaron
minus.
Fox, and it's a different ballgame. I promise
Do
you
you
that.
understand do you understand how bad you have to be a negative box plus minus player in your 5th year? Do you understand how historically bad you have to be? And that's after an uptick. I'm talking full year. We're not even talking about how bad he was.
Barnes is dead last in closeouts over the last 4 years. Dude is a huge reason why the Kings defense is so bad. And that's the context that you're not even looking at.
I don't disagree with that. Look, I guarantee.
But that's
you
Fox's
if
fault.
he was-
You're right. Because Fox has to babysit his ass and say, "Here you go, honey. You got to be a better player. Let me inspire you because you're not a grown man to actually be what you're supposed to be and like hit your fucking shots when I get you open shots." Because it's Fox's fault that he didn't hit a wide open shot. You're right, Rob. It's his fucking fault that he's not hitting shots. 100%, bro. 100%.
I mean, at some point, you can say it's Harrison Barnes' fault, it's Domantas Sabonis' fault, it's the coaching staff's fault, it's everyone's fault.
It's
but it's
Fox's
not
fault. It's
right?
Fox's fault for sure.
It's not Fox's
no,
fault.
it's
It's
there's
not,
a lot of
the
blame for
leadership
Fox.
of your 24-year-old. It's not the leadership of your 24-year-old star point
How
guard
can you
who got
be
a max. And
How can that happen when your owner literally hires his daughter to be an assistant GM? When you talk about development, about developing
of
other
the
guys
G
around
League
him,
team, of the G League team, man.
And
I think
you're a
you might just be
laughing
too close
stock.
to this.
right? But that's my point, that this organization is so bad that just imagine having a new voice, a new head coach, 4 out of the 5 years, which you don't even take into consideration, bro. Like, that's ridiculous to me. John
If I
Morant
can
was
go
giving
back-
the keys to the organization from day one. They built around Ja Morant
understand?
from day one.
Okay. Do you understand how big a part of culture your franchise player is? Like, if Fred VanVleet does not come in, and I'm sorry, but Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam are the leaders for the Toronto Raptors. If those guys do not come in with workman-like mentality, and we saw what Pascal Siakam did in the bubble and in Tampa. He was not himself. He had to blow up with Nick Nurse. What happened to the Raptors? They tanked. You go as your star player goes, you go as your coach goes, you go as your organization goes. But your star player is a really big part of that. Now, you might say,
100%.
Ja was given this, and Ja was given that, and Tim Duncan was handed a silver platter and a dynasty on the plate, and Kobe Bryant. But, dude, these people are part of the situations. You cannot distance them from the situation. Look at what Zion has
I'm not.
in New Orleans.
I'm not.
Look at what Zion has in New Orleans.
I'm saying Fox has been bad defensively.
If that guy, okay, no, absolutely. But if your star point guard, if your highest paid player and your star point guard, your second highest player, who's paid more? Harrison Barnes?
No, he just became the highest paid player. Fox did.
Okay, so if your highest paid player and your leader, your point guard, who's supposed to set the tone for your team offensively and defensively, is not putting in defensive effort, then I think that ripples down to the rest of your team as well. Now, you can argue that that's not the case, that it's Harrison Barnes' fault for being bad at closeouts. You can say it's the coach's fault. You can say it's Vivek Ranadive's fault for hiring his daughter to run the G League, the G League Kings or whatever. My point is simple, that if Ja Morant is not who he is, if you replace Ja Morant on the Grizzlies with Zion Williamson, by the way, who didn't even fucking text CJ McCollum when he was traded, Zion Williamson, who ghosts the entire organization for the entire offseason like a jackass and comes in 50, 80 pounds overweight. Zion Williamson, who's doing 360 dunks ahead of his team as they're making a run in the playoffs and trying to be a competitive team, and he's trying to make it all about him. If you replace Ja Morant with that dude, the Memphis Grizzlies do not make the play-in this year, my dude. That's my point. But then you would say, well, the Memphis Grizzlies are so trash. They drafted Zion Williams. Zion has no help. And then
they were 20-5 without Ja Morant.
Irrelevant. Ja Morant's still part of it. Ja Morant is still a part of that culture. You cannot.
Is Ja Morant hitting shots? Is Ja Morant hitting shots when he's not in the game?
Oh my God!
Is this not a make or miss league?
It is a make or miss league. Okay, what was the Raptors' record without Kawhi Leonard the year they won the championship?
It was great.
It was. I think it was. Hold on. It was ridiculous. It was 17-5, 17-5 or 18-5.
I just said that. It was great. That's great.
So are we making an argument that the Raptors don't need Kawhi?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying team. That's my point. That team is really good with or without. They're better with Ja. They're better. Well,
you cannot.
They're better with Kawhi Leonard for sure because Kawhi is a masterful two-way player. Ja Morant, actually, they're terrible defensively with him in the lineup. So they're a very good team without him. And that's my point. Very good young coach. Great organization. Grit and grind. And guess what? That matters, man. Like, that literally matters.
I look at Ja Morant and I look at those young players and I see a leader who they have embraced. I see a guy who is cheering his teammates on in a way that the camaraderie, the growth in practice.
I agree with that.
Whether a guy plays or not,
I agree with that.
That energy, I look at it like this. There's a guy like Thaddeus Young who comes to the Raptors at the trade deadline from the San Antonio Spurs and literally changes the locker room. You see a huge uptick in Scotty Barnes' performance and confidence. Chris Boucher, Scotty Barnes, and Precious Achiuwa were literally different players after that trade versus before that trade. Compare their averages. Precious Achiuwa went from averaging 22% from three to 39% from three, and he cites Thaddeus Young and his leadership and his mentorship as a huge part of that. Now, that is a bench player coming into your organization and literally changing the mentality of your locker room. Consider the impact that a guy like Marcus Smart has on the Boston Celtics, even when he's not playing. Draymond Green, Marcus Smart, Rasheed Wallace, you can go down the line to so many guys who
I agree, Rob. Fox needs to be a better leader, 100%. But my whole argument is the analytics don't take into account all the bullshit that he's been through with this organization. In comparison to other, no, of course, because you're part of the bullshit as a whole. But in comparison to other guys, this is my only argument. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. Like he wasn't he wasn't given the exact same playing hand or the playing field than like other guys have. Could he have succeeded? Absolutely. And like that falls down on him in terms of leadership. But don't act like he's had the exact same playing field as Tatum did, come into a perfect situation as like other guys have. That shit matters, bro. It does. You are what your culture is.
I look at the Pelicans winning 36 games without Zion, and I look at the Grizzlies being second in the West with Ja, and I say I think that the Pelicans have done a better job roster construction wise, or as good a job roster construction wise. It just so happens that their star player didn't show up. He's not a leader, et cetera, et cetera. Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, a fleece of a deal for Anthony Davis. The multiple picks. They're set up for picks.
How's that a fleece of a deal when the Lakers won the championship?
They won a bubble championship, and they have literally not even sniffed it since. Like, it's a fleece of a deal because you got back Lonzo Ball.
It's a fleece of a deal because he got injured, and Anthony Davis. Bro, you make that trade 10 out of 10 times. Stop. The whole objective in life, if you're in the NBA, is to win the championship. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and even if it costs you 8 years of draft picks and draft swaps and whatever, and it costs you.
But AD got hurt though. Like you're not making the trade saying, well, this guy might get hurt. You make the trade because he's the supreme better player out of all those players. Period.
I agree. I agree that he did. Whatever, he was going to leave. They wanted to get something for him. I think in terms of what you could have gotten for a star player, that's the greatest haul that any team has ever gotten for a star player ever. So good deal for them. They got 3 rotation players. They got 2 probable future all-stars. They cleared the way for a franchise player who just hasn't worked out for them so far. But in terms of looking at that situation, I would say the Pelicans have done a great job building around Zion Williamson. It just so happens that Zion Williamson has not done his part. Ja Morant has done his part. And so we say, wow, Ja Morant got the silver platter. He did everything. He got, this team is great at drafting. His team is great at building. Who's his second best player? Is his second best player better than... He's freaking playing with Dylan Brooks.
But what? Jarrod Jackson
Jr. Jarrod Jackson Jr. and Dylan Brooks are not more skilled offensive players than someone like Jonas Valanciunas and
I would take Jarron Jackson Jr. over Valanciunas fucking 10 out of 10 times every day of the week.
Offensively.
Players, period. Are you telling me that you're taking Valanciunas over Jarron Jackson Jr.?
No, because one of them is way older and one of them plays great defense.
I'm saying today in a playoff series, are you taking Valanciunas over Jarron Jackson? Really?
If you put Ja Morant
in any situation on any team,
the Pelicans need a point guard. Let's say tomorrow, the Pelicans say we will give you Zion Williamson for Ja Morant. Let's make a trade for 2 potentially often injured aspiring a point guard / whatever superstars. I guarantee you that a team of Brandon Ingram, Ja Morant, CJ McCollum. Are you kidding me? Herb Jones and Jonas Valanciunas is a title favorite next year. That's a crazy lineup. That is more offensive talent.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm just saying Valanciunas against Jarron Jackson. I mean, Jarron Jackson is supremely better in every aspect of the game. Supremely better.
Aspect of the game.
Oh my god.
You're not looking at the numbers. You're just thinking about you're talking without looking. Go look at the actual production.
Valanciunas can't stay on the floor in a playoff game. They had to take his ass out of the game.
You're talking defensively.
He's not great enough offensively to stay on the floor. That's my point. He's not, bro. That's why they benched him. And
they benched him because they were spamming pick and roll, and they were putting him in those situations.
So your list has Herbert Jones over Darren Fox, which again, this is why it's a joke of a list because you have Herbert Jones.
Who cares, man? You think it's a joke because you're not looking at the same numbers I'm looking at. I'm looking at my numbers. You're looking at your numbers. You have your eye test. You watch Herb Jones how many times? We're talking about
there's
best.
one.
Okay, by the way.
There's not a single GM that would take Herb Jones over him. Not now, not 10 years from now. Never.
You can keep saying that. But let me tell you, Herb Jones is the greatest, if not second greatest, third greatest defensive rookie of all time. Okay? All time.
This goes against your favoritism of not being a young guy, though, because the guy is a lot older.
He's 23. He's not a lot older. He's 23 years old.
Is 23 now older than 19?
Of course it is. How many rookies were 19? Kate,
so you're going back and forth on, but you're going back and forth on your own way of projecting players.
No, I'm not. I'm telling you, this guy has the potential to be the best defender in the NBA. At 23.
He's literally a year younger than Fox.
I don't care. He's a 99. You were talking about the best defender in the NBA versus the worst defender in the NBA. Are you kidding me? We're comparing apples and oranges here. We're not even comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing apples and water bottles. Okay? Herb Jones, what he does defensively, I think you really need to go, to anyone watching out there who's like, I didn't watch Herb Jones all season, this guy's crazy, go watch Thinking Basketball's video on Herb Jones, the video breakdown that they did on him as the best defensive rookie of all time. And you will see, not just by the numbers, because the numbers love him, he's literally the best defender in the NBA at a certain wing position.
So if he's the best defender in the NBA, why would you put Jabari Smith, Franz Wagner, Jarrett Allen, Tyrese over him? That makes absolutely zero sense. Again, contradicting your own list.
It's not contradiction. Just because you say it's a contradiction doesn't make it a contradiction. I see those guys as having
if you're the best defender, if you're the best defender in the NBA, that's a contradiction.
I see number one, he's 23. If he was 20, this is a different argument. Number two, he doesn't really have a jump shot, and he doesn't really have a huge.
There we go. Here we go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But obviously, if a guy is a one-way player, there's a certain limitation to how good he can be. If Scotty Barnes does not develop a jump shot, then here's a certain cap to how good you can be with him. If Darren Fox doesn't develop a jump shot and he can't play defense, we already talked about that. My point is,
Darren Fox has a jump shot, though. Darren Fox can score 30 points a game without a three-point shot. That's how good he is. That if you're able to score 30 points a game without a three-point shot,
30 points per game.
Who?
Gary Trent scored 30 points. Gary Trent scored 30 points per game for 10 games straight. Okay, so that's it's pretty large sample size. If you take enough shots, you will make enough shots. That's an old adage. Okay, there are a lot of players who put up really really big numbers on bad teams. My point is that you take a guy like Herb Jones and you project him forward as a specialist, and he doesn't have unlike other specialists who found ways to stay on the court, like Draymond Green with his elite passing and his transition play. I'm not sure that I've seen anything from Herb Jones that suggests he can be good at anything offensively. He's great shooter. So that might come later. He is 23. So I'm gonna project a guy like Jabari Smith Jr. or Chet Holmgren a little bit above him because they do have potential on defense, but they also have incredible potential offensively. With a guy like Chet or with Jabari, with Jabari, you're talking about potentially 24, 25 point per game scorer in his prime. That's not something you see in Herb Jones. And you're talking about a guy who's 3 years younger. So I look at a guy like a defensive specialist as being slightly less valuable than an offensive specialist. And offensive specialists are like Trae Young, Luka Doncic, guys like this. So yeah, if you're going to play one side of the ball only, I would rather you only play offense. But the ideal for me is a two-way player. So that's why despite my, when we did the draft grades thing, I was sour.
Then how the fuck is Tyrese number 17? Have you watched this man play defense? He's arguably one of the worst on-ball defenders in NBA history.
I knew you were going to bring this up, so I have the stats for you. So this
I don't need stats. I watched him play for 2 fucking seasons. He's god awful.
Okay, let me put this for you. In terms of defense, Tyrese Halliburton.
I know what you're gonna say because I know what the numbers are, but see that's where they skew him, and the numbers actually kind of show that he's okay defensively, which he's not.
He's not. No. He's not okay defensively. He's terrible. I'm not about to tell you he's okay defensively. I'm just about to show you the difference in where I ranked him, because I knew that you would come up to this because you had this idea that getting off of Tyrese Halliburton was a great deal for the Kings and how they cashed out high on him. And,
I wish I would have kept him, but it got you Sabonis.
Okay, fine. So here's my point here. In terms of defense, Tyrese Halliburton is a bottom 17% percentile defender, which means that of all the players in the NBA who played 350 minutes or more, he is bottom 17, which means he's a terrible defender. I'm not disagreeing with you there, okay? In terms of offense, he's a top 89% offensive player at age 22, okay? Now, this is based on offensive plus minus. This is how the team performed with him versus without him, and this is including both his time in Sacramento and in Indiana, so you have even a greater sample size of two teams, okay? Compare that to Fox, where it's a little bit worse offensively because it's 89th percentile versus 88th percentile. They're pretty close. But, dude, you're talking about a bottom 17% defender versus a bottom 1% defender. Fox is worse defensively and slightly worse offensively because of the three-point shooting differential.
And
now, we can argue that he's more talented.
And guess who Fox is guarding? And guess who Tyrese is guarding? The other team's best guards.
They're both guarding the other team's best guards?
No, I said Fox is guarding the actual point guard, which on most nights is the team's best player, as opposed to who Halliburton taking the other guy, which, again, context matters.
Dude, I'm telling you that there's no number
on
the planet.
So that doesn't matter, right?
Of course it matters. It matters that Tyrese is playing with a pretty good defender behind him. It matters that he's playing under Rick Carlisle, who's a better coach, frankly, than the coach you guys had. It all of this matters. But what I'm saying is that 22, the analytics project him as a better player right now than Fox is at 24. Now, you can argue that all day, but I'm saying 22 versus 24 is not the same. So you are talking about a guy who's in his fifth year versus a guy who's in his second year. And you're talking about a guy who in his second year is outperforming the guy in his fifth year by a hair. So unless you are, okay, now you can always say, okay, well, Fox is going to be really great with Sabonis next year, and Halliburton is basically topped out because his form is funky, and defenses are going to catch up to it, and he's a terrible defender, and it's going to get even worse as he gets older or whatever. Someone's going to become injury prone. All that stuff, you can throw that out the window and say, okay, well, if an anomaly happens, yes, it's possible that Fox will be a better player next year than Tyrese Halliburton. That's possible. Of course it's possible. It's not likely, though. It's not likely. So that's
it's not likely that Fox becomes a better player. Or that he's a better player now.
According to analytics, he is a better player. Offensively, by a margin, and by defensively, by a country mile. Bottom 17% versus bottom 1% is not the same thing. That's like literally that's like getting 2 out of 10. Imagine, like you take the LSATs or like you take the the SATs. There's a very big difference between finishing bottom 17% and bottom 1%. Bottom 1%, you borderline retarded. Bottom 17%, you probably need to go to community college, right? It's different. We're talking about historic.
Like 17% is god awful.
Dude, it's like comparing Luka versus Trey. They're both bad defenders, but one of them is like the worst defender in the NBA, and Luka is like bottom 20%. It is a big difference between like two players. Now you can say they're both bad defensively. Yes, that's not. Neither of those guys is ever going to make an all-defense team ever. Okay. But when we're talking historic levels bad versus bad, I'll take bad. So with Tyrese, I mean, you're talking bad. Bottom 17% is bad. There's not a single Raptor. By the way, the Toronto Raptors, the worst defender on the Toronto Raptors was Jarrod Jackson Jr. this past year. He was, I believe, bottom 55%. So our worst defender was 35% to 40 percentile above Tyrese. And 55 percentile above Darren Fox. So when we're talking about scales of like where players are in terms of how bad they are at certain things, and it's the same thing with how good they are. When you talk about someone like Luka Doncic being top 99th percentile in terms of offense, yeah, that's a very big difference than the guy being 93rd percentile on offense. Because that's literally the difference between a generational offensive hub, superstar, super duper star, and a guy who's a good all-star like Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam's what, like 89th percentile offense. There's a very big difference between 89th percentile offense and 99th percentile offense. We're talking gaps in terms of true shooting percentage, gaps in terms of offensive load, gaps in terms of passer rating, shot quality, everything. You can run everything through Luka in the playoffs. You can't do that with Pascal Siakam, but the gap's only 10%. Right? On the fringes, these percentages do matter. I think if you think the Fox is going to be better than Tyrese Halliburton, I don't disagree with you. It's possible. I don't like Tyrese Halliburton that much. I remember when the trade happened, I was kind of like, I'm not that high on either one of these players. I don't think that much of Sabonis. I don't think that much of Halliburton. I don't think that much of Fox. But if you're asking me, like,
if
is it
Sabonis
likely,
gets a 3-point shot at 37%, does that change anything for you?
absolutely changes everything. It changes everything for me because that 37% 3-point shot becomes, I mean, do the math. 37% times 3, right? That becomes a very efficient shot. That's 2 points. That's 2 percentage points above league average. It totally changes his role in transition. Because the problem here is, I like a fast team around Fox. If I was building a team around Fox, not to keep going back to Fox, but if I was building a team around Fox, I would build a team with slashers, shooters, 3-and-D guys, kind of like what the Mavericks have done around him.
Thank you. So now we're saying the exact same thing that I've been trying to say for 5 fucking years.
But my center would be a guy like Maxi Kleber a better version of Maxi Kleber, a guy who can drop, a guy who can come out and switch and help my weak point guard defensively, a guy who can cover up some a little bit better than Maxi Kleber at the rim, and a guy who can trail on the break with my super fast offense because he's always going to be the last guy up the floor and he can be a 3-point threat. Because in that transition offense where Fox could be that engine, like what we call Giannis light, offense, you need to have some sort of gravity towards your big, because Sabonis is always going to be on a fast break the last guy up the floor. You're going to have the wings filling in. You're going to have
not really. Sabonis actually leads your break a lot of the times, and he's dropping dimes in transition.
He's the slowest player on your team. Okay. In an ideal sense, in an ideal world, he would be your slowest player, okay? You would not have him and a plodding center out there. You would have him as your center and 3 wings who are incredible 3-and-D guys. Like, let's hypothetically say Dorian Finney-Smith plus, whatever the Mavs have basically around Luka, right? Those 3 guys, right? And let's say those 3 guys are filling, but maybe better paint attackers than those guys. And you have Fox leading it, and then you have this 5-out offense. Well, ideally on a fast break, you would have that big trailing that fast break so that if the action doesn't work at the rim, your immediate thing is a kick out. Kind of like
I tell
what
you
Draymond
what,
does.
if Luka Doncic has Sabonis as opposed to Maxi Kleber or Porzingis, it'd be a whole different ballgame. Like, the Mavs would be that much better.
Wait, what? You think Luka needs a guy like Sabonis?
They would be that much better, yeah.
Oh my God, no, hell no, no. Sabonis needs the ball. Luka needs the ball. No, that's just too much. No, and they're both bad defenders. No way, absolutely not. Like, I would never pair those guys. They have the perfect team around them. They just need better versions of what they need, what they have. And honestly, if the Sacramento Kings are watching what Dallas is doing with Luka, honestly, like, and maybe like some combination of what Dallas is doing with Luka and what Memphis did with Ja Morant. Clear out the paint, play 5-out, have a 3, have a guy like Jarron Jackson Jr. Jarron Jackson Jr. would be the perfect match with Darren Fox, just like he is with Ja Morant. Someone like that who can trail, who can hit threes, who can slash a little bit, who can protect the paint, who can cover up some messes that, guys like Ja Morant. Ja Morant's not a good defender. He's not a good defender either. So there's a guy who's constantly giving up.
So Miles Turner. So. Yeah. He would be good. He would be like a poor man's Jarron Jackson Jr. Like, I think that would be a good compromise, I think, for the Kings. If you had to give up, you know what? RP says the Mavs only have one ball handler predictable. Warriors are exposing them, just like what happened to the Suns.
That's absolute bullshit, RP. No offense, but Spencer Dinwiddie is an elite ball handler. Jalen Brunson is awesome. I don't know if you saw what the Mavericks did without Luka Doncic against the Utah Jazz. Granted, it is the Utah Jazz, but I think Jalen Brunson is awesome. I think he's going to get a good contract this year. I think they have 3 creators on the perimeter, one of them coming off the bench right now in Spencer Dinwiddie. And I think that's the reason why Luka ball has worked as well as it has, because eventually Luka gets tired. Luka has to sit in the corner and Luka has to go to the bench, and you need something to carry your offense through those droughts. You can't just have 5 shooters. This is what I'm talking about. Like, when it comes to offensive planning and team building, you can't have too much of the same thing. You can't just have 5 shooters out there. Who the hell is supposed to create? You can't have 5 rim runners because then you have no spacing. You need some balance. You need some, and a lot of roster construction doesn't make sense. The Lakers don't make sense to me. The Rockets don't. I mean, they make a little bit more sense to me than the Lakers. The Kings don't make sense to me. There's a lot of teams out there where the roster construction just does not make sense offensively. Skill sets do not match each other. And then there's just certain players who just fit into every situation. And those are very complete, well-rounded players. Guys like Franz Wagner, guys like Miles Turner, they fit into a lot of situations. They have a high level of portability. To stay on topic with this 25 under 25, because I realized
we got Herbert Jones 21, Jabari Smith, Franz Wagner, Jarrett Allen, Tyrese. So tier 4, go ahead, Jaron Jackson Jr. and Chet. See, you have Chet over Jarron Jackson.
Okay, wait. We didn't talk about Franz Wagner. We didn't talk about a lot of these guys. Let's just quickly go through this.
Go ahead.
You might have to cut through this a little bit later. So Jabari Smith Jr. again, like I see a guy who's probably going to go first overall. Bill Simmons is probably like being paid by his agent or something to plug him in every single podcast. And he talks about like how he has that Giannis type of drive to get better. I have no idea. These kids are literally practiced to sell themselves to GMs, to media people at this stage. You have no idea how a kid is going to react to making $8 million a year.
Exactly, which is why I can't put anyone on this list over any of the guys that you've said. Like, there's just no way.
But look, I treat college the same way. Like, it's not like I have no information on Chet Holmgren. I've watched him in high school. I've watched him in Team USA. I have watched him. I've watched him win. I've watched him win state with Minnesota and Jalen Suggs. I have watched this guy since he was 16 years old. So because I've watched him from 16 all the way till 20, I have 4 years of data on him. Do I have more data on Scotty Barnes and Cade Cunningham? Yeah, by a year. But that just means that I have more information to project. Anyways, so I like Jabari Smith Jr. a lot. He's tall, probably 6'11". He's going to end up at 6'11". He's got incredible shooting. I think I see a Rashard Lewis type of secondary star with him. A guy who could probably drop 22, 23 points. 23 points, 24 points per game, but not be your number one guy. So I hope he ends up in a system where he's not asked to do that. I think Houston would have been a great situation for him and Jalen Green. That would be incredible. And they really do need someone next to Jalen Green.
He's fit amazing next to Sabonis. I'm just saying.
If he slips to number 4, it's a no-brainer. I think, see ya, Harrison Barnes. Nice to know you, and trail off into the
keep
sunset.
them together. Keep them together. Why not? I mean, he's 6'11", can shoot the shot. I think Jabari provides good defense, good rim protection, that's what you need around Sabonis.
A lot of people see him as Jarron Jackson Jr. minus the elite rim protection.
I think he's a better shooter.
I don't know. He is a better shooter. So Jarron Jackson plus on offense, Jarron Jackson negative on defense. I mean, I think a lot of people are just projecting that because they're both tall black guys who can shoot. Yeah. But I don't know. I think he's his own player type. I like the Rashard Lewis comp. I don't like anyone trying to suggest that he's like Kevin Durant or anything like that. He's not that good. But he's a good fit at 3 or 4. So to go, and then Franz Wagner, I love him. I think, in terms of portability, literally any team in the league could use this guy tomorrow and he would play 25 to 30 minutes for you and fit in everywhere. Like he's good facilitator, decent defender, good slasher, good shooter. He just does every single thing that you could possibly ask for in a third player on your team. And I think he'll show commitment to getting better. I think Jarrett Allen, really did a great job of bolstering the Cavs defense this year. We saw the Cavs dominating the Eastern Conference, third seed, 4th seed for most of the season. Jarrett Allen goes out, and the Cavs miss the playoffs.
So
and
no Paolo Banchero? So no Banchero on this list?
Nope, no Banchero. I do not like him.
You just said a guy that can't pass, like Banchero can pass, can self-create, is elite at scoring the ball, super high IQ. Like, with your explanations, why?
You can say all of that. You can say all of that about Paolo Banchero. I don't see who the hell he can guard at an NBA level. You and I have very different understanding of defensive prioritization when it comes to positional basketball. Like, I look at a guy like Franz Wagner, and if he could not show me
Over
that he could
Keegan
defend the
Murray?
way,
Sorry, Keegan Murray, who can do everything Franz can.
I have one more year of data on Franz. I feel a little bit more comfortable with him. But, obviously, if we do this list again a year from now, I could very easily see me being very wrong about Keegan.
And that's why I hate this fucking list.
Obaji.
And that's why I hate this list
Okay,
because it's like literally projecting and like there's just too much uncertainty.
But this is how you get better. Look, we're gonna look at this list 2 years from now, and either we're gonna say Rob is a fucking genius or he's a fucking idiot. And I can't believe that in what world did he think this bust Chet Holmgren, who came in and literally fractured his ankle and never played.
I don't think he's a bust. I'm just using the things that you're saying, and I'm thinking about these guys. I'm like,
look, man. I look at it like this way. If you wanna shit test your model, like, this is how you do it. You project and you see if you're right. What you did last year with the draft board, you had Scotty Barnes number 2, and you've been talking about it all year. Like, you had Scotty number 2, Cade number 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'm sure you learned a lot about how to project bigs by your undervaluation of Evan Mobley, right? So the same way here, I'm probably going to learn a lot about my overvaluation of defense by looking at this list 2 years from now. So moving on, and we already talked about Tyrese, so we can move on to tier 4. I don't know if so Jarrod Jackson Jr. is all potential at this point for me. Like, there's a bit of production there. Obviously, his offense has not caught up to his defense yet, but his defense, of what he does at this age defensively, is already elite. He's already made an all-defensive second team or first team, second team, right? All defense. He's already the best defender on the second best team in the West. Some people think they're frauds. Some people think they underperformed. I think he's a really, really big part of why they were able to weather the storm without Ja Morant. And I think,
who said they underperformed?
Some people think they're frauds, man. Some people think they were just like a really weak number two seed. I don't agree with that. I think that
They literally could have been in the Warriors game 2. They shouldn't be in them game 4. Like, it was literally there for them.
Yeah, and they were the youngest team in the playoffs, and it showed. And I think the scar tissue of losses, it builds up, and young teams act young, unfortunately, at the wrong times sometimes, right? And I just don't think that you have a team like the battle-tested Warriors. They've blown leads, they've blown series, they've blown the finals. They understand that pain. They understand how to act with an 18-point lead, and they understand how to act with a 20-point deficit. They understand how to composure is so underrated, and there's a lot of young teams. The Raptors folded, right? Well, why did they fold? Because suddenly all those battle-tested guys like Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry, those guys are gone, and suddenly it's new again. And you got Scotty Barnes and Gary Trent Jr. and it's literally a whole bunch of guys who've just never been in this position before. So I think age and experience comes a long way. I think the Grizzlies will be really good. I think Jarron Jackson Jr. is the second best player by far, and a really big part of their future going forward. Let's move on to Chet Holmgren. Honestly, I am split on Chet. So earlier when we talked about Chet Holmgren, I said that you were underrating him, and that all the analytics models project him as somewhere between Evan Mobley and Anthony Davis, something like that, right? I have since rethought my position on him. I was meaning to tell you about this. So I don't think I'm as high on him as I was back then. And back then, I mean 2 months ago.
Just because the analytics are skewing the way you watch them on film?
No, I think because I have gotten a better opportunity to listen to him and to just hear him speak and to observe him in terms of like just how he carries himself and how he thinks about himself, and how he reacts to winning and how he reacts to losing. And because all of this is part of how you project the guy's mental makeup going forward, right? Like drafting is not like exact science. Every team has their own procedure about how they're going to project the guy, how he's going to react to certain things, the questions you ask him. For instance, the Raptors asked guys at the draft this year to draw up a game-winning play. And they wanted to see if the guy was, what kind of play the guy drew up, because it showed, if he was going to have himself passing in that opportunity or shooting in that opportunity. It showed what kind of play, what kind of situational awareness basketball. There's a lot you can learn from a simple question like that. So a simple question like, who's the best player in the NBA, Chet Holmgren, and him saying me in 2 months, I don't know how I feel about that. I think that irks me. And I think, you know what is throwing me off a lot? His closeness with Jalen Green and the potential that he's going to end up in Orlando in that dumpster fire of an organization right now. No offense. I mean, they were good defensively last year. They've found something in a lot of their core pieces. With Jonathan Isaac back, they could be really good. But who the hell is shooting? That's a roster that's just really messy. You know, Chet's not a great shooter right now. He's a decent shooter, shot 39%. So I put him a little bit lower on this list. If we had done this like 2-3 months ago, before the final, before the NCAA, before March Madness, and whereas I was just looking at the box numbers and I was seeing him and trying to project him, what would he look like with another, 20 pounds of strength? Because he's never going to be Anthony Davis. He's never going to be that. He's not broad-shouldered. He doesn't have the frame to fill out. But I do see, I think, the most interesting comp that I've seen to him, Al Horford. I think that's a really fair comp, not in terms of body type, not in terms of ethnicity, but in terms of overall impact. So a low-level all-star who can impact winning, who can protect the rim, who can facilitate ball movement, who can shoot a little bit.
That's pretty good.
But it's great. It's not Evan Mobley, right? So that's where I'm a little bit higher on Mobley than I was 3 months ago, and I'm a little bit lower on him, even though his college stats, his analytics in college project him as a better player than Evan Mobley. I think that there's a very big difference between USC and Gonzaga in terms of who they play, in terms of strength.
But I told you that 2 months ago. I'm like, I don't think he's better than Evan Mobley.
No, you're right. And since you told me that, I've thought about it a lot, and I have decided to go against the analytics and say that, yes, there is a certain upside to the type of player that a guy of this frame can be in the NBA. And I'm not saying that he's going to be Pokusevski because he is so far away.
But if he's Al Horford, then I think I'm taking him at number one.
If he's Al Horford, I don't know if you take him at number one. I think it depends on who you think Shaedon Sharpe and Jabari Smith Jr. and whatever. I mean, you could argue that Al Horford has impacted winning a lot. He pretty much anchored those Atlanta Hawks teams. He's been really great. He's a huge part of why the Celtics are as good as they are. But yeah, I could go either way. Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren. Whereas 2 months ago it was a no-brainer for me. Chet Holmgren, 100%. Jordan Poole. I think this is the first place where I am just ignoring everything I think about defense and just going pure offensive firepower. Whereas I think that it's hard for me to gauge a guy like Jordan Poole because in an ideal world, I probably have him at 22, 21. But because he's doing it at such a high stage, his numbers have fallen off a lot in the playoffs. So we are seeing, that part of it. Probably, if we did this next month, he would be lower for me. But right now,
no, I just feel like teams have adjusted to him, and now he has to make the adjustment to the way they're playing him now. So he's so good offensively. Go ahead.
No, he is, and I like his attitude. I like his toughness. I like the fact that he's not afraid to go at star players. I love the culture that he's in. And the other thing I think with Jordan Poole is, it's another guy that we have years and years of data to look at. We have seen him in the G League. We have seen him, we have seen him in losing situation with Golden State when, he had the longer hair and they were losing a lot. We saw who he was at that point. We saw game at every single step, and we have seen that game get better and better and better and better. And that doesn't mean that he will continue to get better next year. As you've said, projecting is difficult, right? But when you have 3 to 4 years of consistent growth, like you have with Obagi or you have with Keegan Murray, even you track Keegan Murray from high school to a few years in college, you can see predictable growth year over year. It might stop. It might totally fall off a cliff. You don't know that. But it's a good sign to see a guy getting a little bit better every single year. I look at guys like free throw percentage, right? I look at a guy like Christian Koloko, right? Awesome physical specimen, right? But a lot of people are like, oh, well, he didn't shoot. Well, I look at his free throw percentage as a freshman, 37%. Next year, 52%. Next year, 72%. I'm like, okay. every year this guy's adding shooting as a bigger part of his repertoire. His mid-range percentages go up. Now that's something I can track, even though he's a 22-year-old, he's a junior, you know. Even though all of that, I can still see a predictable growth line. I like to see that. With freshmen, it's very difficult, you know, with one and dones, especially with someone like Shaedon Sharpe. It's incredibly difficult to project because you don't have enough data. Moving on, Jalen Green. Just listened to his Bill Simmons, you know, interview. That was interesting. Just a guy who, again, like in terms of, okay, so I know I was very, very critical in our draft review show. I was very complimentary of Jalen Green, and I was very critical of Jalen Suggs. But then I looked at the numbers. You will not believe what I saw. To my horror, that Jalen Suggs was actually a very, very positive defender, despite being historically
Someone just
bad.
said that. Like, someone just said that on our show. They just dropped a comment like 2 days ago or a day ago. And he was mad that we didn't mention one thing about his defense because all you talked about was how horrific he was offensively. And I'm like, dude, I defended. Yeah. He's like, yeah, you defended him, but you never talk about it. I'm like, but we know he's a good defender. Like, I don't think we have to like say that.
It's interesting when a 20-year-old wing defender, point guard defender on a bad team can actually show that level of defensive awareness and effectiveness. It's really rare. So to complement Jalen Suggs, he was second or third best. Well, he was the third or fourth best defender among the rookie class this year.
But he's not on your list.
He's not on my list because he's historic. He's historically bad.
I love fucking with Rob, man. And for the record, man, I want people to understand this. It's all love. Like, we love to argue, and that's the point of like this being entertaining. But go ahead, man.
Yeah, so with Jalen Suggs, he's historically bad on offense, and he's significantly above league average on defense, which is great. With Jalen Green, he's actually below average on defense, historically. He's below average defensively, one of the worst defenders in the NBA, right up there with Darren Fox, Trae Young, etc. Just guys who do not guard. Has all the physical tools to guard, apart from strength. But the offense is not great. But with Jalen Green, we saw that there is a projectable player type. We have seen this before. He's following a model, and that's the Anthony Edwards model, right? We have seen alpha scorers who are given a way too big a role struggle to start the season and slowly figure it out. I saw him getting double teamed, just like Cade was, double teams. And I don't think that when you look at numbers, just as a reflexive, exercise and just staring at stats and saying, right, this guy shot 7 for 10 or versus this guy shot, 4 for 10. Well, if the guy who shot 4 for 10 is garnering a double team on every single shot, and the guy 7 for 10, is putting up this huge, stat line, and you think he's super efficient, but everything is a rim run wide open underneath the basket because someone's creating a shot for him, I think that's a big difference. And I think with guys like Jalen Green, Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, I think there's some level of how much do you trust them to figure this out, because they're obviously being overloaded as offensive players. I think the only reason that I have Jalen Green lower is because of his terrible defense, limited creation ability as a passer. So he's getting better as a passer, but not great passer. And I just think that there's a certain level that you can go to with a guy who just hunts 25 points per game. But 25 point per game shot creators who can create at above league average efficiency, can shoot from three, can, drop a highlight every now and again, can probably, because of just how he generates space, can probably project well as playoff scorers. And I just like his alpha mentality in terms of scoring.
And those don't grow on trees. And that's my point, where if you have a guy like that, then you have to surround him with the right players, more 3-and-D guys that can complement his weaknesses. That's Absolutely. A good sign of a good organization. And that's always been my argument to you. It's not that, yes, I get that he has limitations. I get that Fox has limitations. Every player does. But if you don't surround them to be successful, just like if Scotty would have went to the Magic, that would have been a horrific thing for the guy. And right now, we may be looking at him just a little bit there. I'm not saying he wouldn't be great, but his perception would be differently right now.
For sure. You could make it, Van Hoot, who's always commenting on your, stuff. Kenyon and I were talking earlier today about whether or not, if the Raptors had given Scotty a larger offensive role, whether they would have thrown him out to the Wolves and his efficiency would be super low and be talking about him being terrible, or whether we might be talking about him as, the next Giannis and, even better than what we do now. You don't know that, because he was protected, he was sheltered, he was, given this insulation of having like all these other guys around him. And you can't say what Scotty Barnes is going to be when he faces consistent double and triple teams, like Cade Cunningham, right? Or you can't say what he's going to be like when he has to take 25 shots a game like Jalen Green and face double teams and be his team's de facto go-to guy and do so without spacing like Fox is doing. You don't know who guys are in certain situations because you only see them in the situation they're in. But I look at someone like Scotty Barnes, I look at someone like Cade Cunningham, I will project those guys to be slightly better than Jalen Green in the similar situation, because of their passing, because of their size. So I look at a guy like Jalen Green, and I
think that's fair.
6'4".
I think that's super fair.
And it's like 6'4", not a great passer. What does that project to be versus, with Cade 6'6", Scotty 6'9", elite passers or good passers. In the case of Cade, not a great passer, but a good passer, and Scotty possibly a great passer. What does that, if you double this guy, you're actually playing right into his hands as a player. So whereas, with someone like Chris Bosh, I remember back in 2005, I was thinking, man, the minute Carter and Jalen Rose get out of here and you put the ball in this guy's hands, he's not a great passer. He's not going to be able to handle double teams. And we saw it every freaking time. And what I see in Scotty Barnes at 20 and even Cade, is just better reactivity, better court awareness. So I look for that in terms of projectability going forward. Let's go to the next. So after Jalen Green, LaMelo. I'm a little bit torn on LaMelo. Just zero commitment to defense, super immature. But in terms of what he does well, it's elite. It's like top 1%, top 2%, great. In transition. He's still super young. I don't know where I am on him right now, personally. I understand that this same list last year for certain websites had him number 3, number 4, number 5. I don't know how to be that high on a guy who doesn't play defense. I don't know how to be that high on a guy where the coach is literally insisting he play defense and he's kind of just like, nah, I'm good, right? I look at guys like LaMelo and, not to be like super critical of people who speak a certain way or, because these, sometimes we forget these guys are 20, 21, they grow up, they think a certain way. But there's like exceedingly like, I expect all 20-year-olds to be a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, a little bit not super savvy. Like I expect obviously Jimmy Butler, if you listen to Jimmy Butler at 20 talking versus Jimmy Butler now, it's a completely different thing what 10, 12, 13 years of media training does for you. But man, like there are just certain guys where I listen to them before the draft and I'm like, this guy is like 12 years old mentally, right? Like they're so immature. I look at guys like Tyler Hero. I felt that way about him. Jalen Green, to some extent, I felt that way about him. And
I didn't. Not about Jalen.
Yeah, you didn't. I did. And I see a guy who, when he's asked about like his goals for next season, it's like all about 25 points per game, and and when he's asked about like what he likes to do on the basketball court, it's like step back this, step back that. It's like I don't really understand the thinking part of the game. And it's weird because then I watch him and I'm like, man, like, is he just so athletically gifted that he doesn't have to think about the game? And he just got by on athleticism through all of AAU and all of high school. And he's just never had to really think about the angles the way that he's going to have to now. Is that why he's struggling? So I don't know, like with Cade and Scotty, again, I just see guys who think about the game a little bit more to my liking, even though Cade had a terrible season relative to what the expectations were. I still see a guy who has buy-in on defense, who understands how to win, who's coachable, who like when you tell Cade like, hey, like this, we need this from you, we need more from this. It's not like he's dialed out and he's thinking, about something else, or he's thinking about the next play. He's focused. He's hyper focused. So even though the physical gifts are in favor of Jalen Green, or even like a guy like LaMelo Ball versus Cade Cunningham, I got to go with Cade, even though, I could definitely make a case that LaMelo was way better as a rookie than Cade was. Yeah. So let's go to the next one. And speak of the, yeah, okay, we got Darius Garland. Honestly, I'm probably going to regret putting Darius Garland behind Cade Cunningham. But again, there's like a certain limitation on defense that I do have to factor in with smallish guards. I have seen with Fred VanVleet the best case scenario for a small guard. Like as a Raptor fan, I think we've had two small guards pretty much lead our team for the last 12 years, and that's been Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet for 10 years. That's been Kyle and Fred, and before that we had TJ Ford. And I don't think any one of those guys is a bad defender. I think TJ tried really hard. I think Fred is, as good as it gets defensively for a guy his size. Lateral quickness, digging on, team defenders, super strong concepts. Kyle Lowry, same thing. But every now and again, you do see a certain limitation when they're asked to switch onto a wing, or even when they're asked to switch onto a big in the post. Like there's just a certain limitation when you build with a guy like that. And I think what I'm seeing, if you look at the playoffs, and any fans out there who are listening, you go like actually track this. Go look at the average height of the point guards eliminated in the first round, second round, and the ones that are still playing right now, and you will see a progressive buildup. Whereas the average height of the point guards eliminated in the first round was 6'2", and the average height of the point guards still playing right now is 6'4.5", and it just like the cutoff became higher and higher because a guy like Marcus Smart can actually switch on to a big and not give up an easy layup. Like he can still push back, and I don't think a guy like Darius Garland can. Now, it just so happens that he's on a team with so many 7-footers and so much size that it might not even freaking matter.
Yep.
But I look at portability with a list like this, and I definitely think that a guy like Darius Garland, there's certain limitations roster-wise to what you can do. But awesome passer, great shot maker, awesome shooter, probably going to be like way higher if we do this list a year from now. Now, Cade and Shea, I think we can talk about them both because they were almost, traded for each other last year, and why I have one over the other. I think with Cade, I think he's an overrated playmaker. I think that part of his game is a little bit overrated. I think he's always just been given the ball to be, the decision maker. And I have seen now 3 straight years from Montverde to college, now to first year at Detroit, where I have not been super impressed with him as a playmaker. I see him as more like a secondary ball handler, and I think he could be really, really good in that role. I think they need to stop trying to act like he's Penny Hardaway. He's not. He's not like that kind of guy. But his upside as a, I don't want to say Luka because that's insane, but his upside as a Paul Pierce type of player is still there. And I see a guy who's super crafty, whose game is so far ahead of his age in terms of just polish and awareness, his footwork, ambidextrous finishing, the length, the fact that he's already played against double teams and has learned to adjust to that already. I think he's a really good player. I don't see like superstar. I see 4-time All-Star Cade Cunningham. That's what I see at the end of his career. So I do not see a superstar. And
That's
with
not
Shea,
bad.
That's great. I mean, it's probably exceeding. I see him as like exceeding the value of an overall, like first overall pick on average. But to be the first overall pick of this class, there will be like at least 4 players better than him in this draft class. Maybe 3, 4, definitely. He will not be like when we look back on this draft class 10 years from now. I think people still right now they're clinging to their bias from last year because everyone had Cade number 1. Even I had Cade number 1. I think most people are still saying like, okay, well he's going to figure it out. You'll see year 2 we're going to see Luka Doncic. I'm sorry, he's not Luka Doncic. He doesn't have that kind of physicality. He doesn't create separation the way Luka did. He doesn't pass the way Luka did. He doesn't shoot the way Luka did. There's nothing about his game that resembles Luka Doncic, and people who just keep clinging to that are going to be wrong. Now, moving on to Shea, who's older than Cade and, better, clearly better. I think it's just like if he can take a step as a shooter, and we have seen shooting potential from him. The 2 times I've seen him in the playoffs, he's been incredible. I think he's, just incredible in that mid-range, finishing in the paint, super-sized point guard. Not a great defender. Another guy who looks like he could be the greatest defender on earth, but just isn't that good defensively. How much of that is him playing in Oklahoma City and knowing that his team is literally going out there and trying to lose games, and how much of that is just
So
his
the numbers show
limitations?
that he's not a good defender.
He's not a great defender at all. He's not like a top 50% defender. Like he's like point of attack. But again, like look, there's a certain degree of variance when it comes to defense. Like look, there are certain guys where you could say the analytics show that this guy is a bottom 40, and maybe in a different system he could be like a top 40, right? That's a 20% swing, right? I can see that happening. And there are a lot of guys out there where you could say, okay, Gary Trent Jr., Portland, bottom 20% defender, the bottom 30% defender, put him in a better situation. He improves a lot. He buys in. He's in a different scheme. He has got better defenders around him. Suddenly, he's better. But he's not great. He's not good. He's just better. So that's my point. It's like if you're a great defender, you'll be at least good everywhere. Like you could put Jarron Jackson Jr. in, like Jarron Jackson Jr. is like I think like a great defender. Robert Williams, great defender. Marcus Smart's great defender. You put them in any team, they'll still be good. They may not be as great as they are now, but they'll still be good.
But that's
The
where raw.
ratings-
But that's where raw optimization matters. It's like, okay, well, if that's your job, like if that is the number one priority, and I expect you to be a good defender. But if your job is to maximize your offense and to be the offense, which that's what Shea and Fox and Trae Young and Luka are, then I give him a pass every single time.
Okay. Well, I mean, with Shea, one of the things that elevates him above other guys on this list, for me at least, what elevates him above Darius Garland, even though Darius Garland has won more than Shea, technically he's won more than him now.
Shea's a
He's
better
younger.
player.
Shea is a better player. What puts him over someone like LaMelo Ball? What puts him over someone like
Shea's a better
Tyrese
player.
Halliburton?
Shea's better.
Right. It's not just that he's better. It's that his being on the court has led to winning. Now he hasn't been on the court a lot for Oklahoma City, and part of that is injuries. Part of that is I just think like just them tanking. I think that's just kind of like an incentive to stretch every single injury out for like 2 months with that team. But I really do see a competent team when he's on the court. I see him impacting other guys. I see other guys play better with him. I see a player who impacts winning, and I think that that's important. Now, number 8, Zion Williamson. Honestly,
I would have put Shea over him.
You would. I won't. Zion is 21 years old. I understand the injury concerns. I understand the defensive concerns. But let me tell you, even
the weight concerns.
Yes. Okay. So look, New Orleans, we give them a lot of credit now for being an organization that has done a good job of building around him. But that was not always the case. That was not the case 3 years ago. Okay. This is an organization that has made a lot of boneheaded moves, and we could probably argue that he's a part of that. Just like we're making the criticism, I was making the criticism that Darren Fox is a part of his bad situation. I could say, yes, Zion Williamson is a part of his own bad situation, and the situation is of his creating. And that if he was, a better leader, sure, like we could make an argument that he would be in a better situation. But I cannot ignore the fact that in the lone season that he really had a chance to play, and he was like 19, 20 years old, that he dominated grown men and put up like 28 points per game on incredible efficiency. Like I'm not saying, and they won with him. Like they were winning with him doing that. It's not like he was putting it up on a 10 win team and he was taking 50 shots a game to do it. No, he was efficient as hell. He was dominant. He was completely unstoppable. And he wasn't terrible on defense. He wasn't good on defense, but he wasn't like league worst defender and you had to hide him. He was better than Luka Doncic on defense. And I think he has got a lot of shooting potential. I think unstoppable going to the rim.
You think he has shooting potential?
I do. Yeah.
I don't.
I think he can.
I don't. I think it's shot. Well, it depends. Like if he works with like an all-class shooting coach, and for sure. But
I think he's an underrated passer. I saw that at Duke, and I saw that when he was playing. I think his downhill gravity is insane. His rebounding is a really big part of defense. Really big part of defense, securing a defensive rebound. And offensive rebounding is a huge, huge thing when it comes to offensive
But Sabonis
efficiency.
is a terrible defender, but a great rebounder. Like the best rebounder.
That's literally, well,
He's
He's
arguably
not the
top
best
3.
rebounder.
I mean, he's always top 3 in rebounds.
I mean, okay, I'll look it up right now, but I don't think so. So like, okay, so with him, with who are we talking about here? Shit,
Sabonis.
sorry, I just got like.
He's not an elite rebounder.
He's good. He's a good defender, and he's a good rebounder. But
he's a terrible defender, though.
So offensive rebound rate for Sabonis, 69th percentile, and defensive rebounding 97th percentile.
Yeah, that's
so between
elite.
those two, yeah, he's an elite defensive rebounder. He's not an elite offensive rebounder.
But that's securing. But that's securing what? The possession.
Oh, okay. But here's the trade-off here. So this is what I'm talking about. So I'm glad that you talked about Sabonis, because we're not going to talk about him since he's too old for this list. But let's have a little divergent on Sabonis. So Sabonis is a 97th percentile defensive rebounder. But you know what his rim percentage is? It's 53rd percentile as a rim defender. Does not offer a lot. So opponents shoot less. Okay, so basically, if let's say whatever your average is, league average, at the rim, opponents shoot 1.7% worse at the rim against him than they do league average. Now that's not saying he's a terrible defender at the rim, but compare that to someone like Precious Achiuwa, who is a really good, shot blocker. Well, not really good shot blocker, but he's a good rim protector, and opponents shoot like 8.8 to 9% worse at the rim. So your big man is 1.7% better than league average at the rim. You understand what I'm saying? That means compared to all players who played 350 minutes, including guards, including Jalen Suggs, Darren Fox, all those guys, he's 1.7%. Most good big men, you look at Jarron Jackson Jr., Robert Williams, all of these guys that you consider, like even Jonas Valanciunas, okay, who you have said can't defend, he's terrible. Even his, like, at the rim defense, like, okay, I'll give you the perfect example. Jonas Valanciunas, we said we were talking about Domantas Sabonis being a 97th percentile defensive rebounder, and you said that's elite. Well, you know what Jonas Valanciunas is? He's also 97th percent defensive rebounder.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the same. But rim defense, he's slightly worse than Domantas Sabonis. So he's 46th percentile instead of 53rd percentile. So we're talking about, when you say Jonas Valanciunas is a terrible defender, right?
I also said Sabonis is a bad defender. Yeah, he's terrible too.
Yeah, so he's pretty bad too. So that's what I'm saying. Like, ideally, from your big man, it's a trade-off. So a guy like
but Jarron Jackson isn't a good rebounder either. So that's where all these numbers need context to everything that they do. So, and this is just strictly looking just at their box score rebounding. Like, he's one of the worst rebounders at his position. So that's where I find all this very interesting. It's like, okay, well, his rim percentages is this. Well, his rebounding is this. It's like, okay. And I loved Jarron Jackson was the second best player to me in the 2018 class. Like, he was second on my big board. Like, to me, he was the best big man in his class. So I love him, and I think he impacts winning, which is a huge reason why he got extended and Bagley didn't. Right? It's just one of those things where they paid him a max on what? On projecting him to be X player. I get that. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. So I mean, like with Jarron Jackson, it's completely inverted. What you're talking about, like, instead of
I'm sure it is. That's my point.
He's a 28th percent defensive rebounder, but he's a 99th percentile defensive force at the rim, right? So the question is, what would you rather have, right? In your big, do you want a guy? And it's a philosophical argument, because you have a guy like Hassan Whiteside, right, who blocks a ton of shots at the rim. You have a guy like Miles Turner who blocks a ton of shots at the rim. But very often, the guy who blocks a ton of shots at the rim usually is out of position for defensive rebounds. Almost always. Unless you are a historic defender, a la Ben Wallace, a la Rudy Gobert. Robert Williams is up there as well.
I think Whiteside's a good defensive rebounder, though, and I don't like the guy at all. But when you switch him on to Steph Curry and you switch him on to any decent guard and you put him in the pick and roll, then you're going to see a different version of Hassan Whiteside. Same with Gobert. Same with Valanciunas. Same with Sabonis. Sabonis is a little bit better than those guys, but still, like, you get the point.
No, for sure, and I see your point. So what I'm saying is, like, we can argue that, like, a guy who's not a great rim protector needs to be paired with a guy who is, right? So if I'm going to have a guy like Sabonis, ideally I want to have a guy who's an incredible rim
Like
protector
Chet.
next to him.
Like Chet, that can potentially shoot
Like,
and then can protect the
like
rim.
Chet, like, and ironically, like Miles Turner. In theory, when you think about it, you're like, great, that would be really, really great. Why didn't that work? Why didn't that work for Indiana, right? But again, in theory, you would think, like, if the pieces around those players are fine, then that's the type of player you have to pair with. I just prefer, personally, a guy who's a little bit more balanced. I don't necessarily want a guy like Sabonis or Valanciunas, and I'm really, really happy that, like, we moved off of Valanciunas for the Raptors, because yeah, if you're a casual fan and you see Jonas Valanciunas play basketball, you're like, this guy is literally Hall of Famer. 30 points, hitting threes on the break, 22 rebounds. This is the greatest player in the NBA. How is he not winning MVP every single year? But then you actually check the analytics, you check the on-off metrics, you see how much he actually impacts winning, and you're just like, God damn it. If this guy was not on the court, half of his defensive rebounds would be uncontested and gobbled up by just about every single person. Him being on the court is literally surrendering, like, tons of open threes, and we're losing all this mobility on the perimeter. So it's like he's giving you 2 points and he's costing you 3 points every single time down the court. And it's like, you just can't play with guys like that. I shy away, when I look at a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, and I'm like, God damn it, if I could go back, if I was the Kings GM and I could pick any player in the world, like, if I could go back and have that asset again, I would probably try to find something that fits a little bit better than Domantas Sabonis, because I know the challenges of building around a guy like Domantas Sabonis is not easy. And to pair Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, those are two guys that I don't think are easy to build around. So your other three pieces have to be literally perfect.
Like, they have to be 3-and-D guys. Like, you have to have 3 Harrison Barnes, which that's the issue where they have not 3 starters.
That, well, not only that, you would have to have 3 guys, but also you would have to have guys on the bench who also play that way too. Literally, your entire roster has to be full of those types of guys, right? And your upside in exchange for that is you have a very, very, very high level post passer and post scorer in Sabonis in exchange, and you have a great downhill paint finishing guard in Fox. And while it's fair to say that, in a weird way, Sabonis' pass playmaking offsets the fact that Fox is not the greatest playmaker in the world, there's so much, like, it's like threading a needle with those two guys, building the rest of the pieces around them, because there's not just your other 3 starters. It has to be literally everyone on your court, because your backup point guard has to be able to shoot, like, incredibly well to play with Sabonis, right? And it's like, it's a weird match, because it's like your 2 best players are the hardest players in the world to build around, in my opinion. So right. Moving on from Shea, let's, Zion, Trey. Okay, so Trey
quickly,
just missing tier 2. I think, I think he's all world offense, right? All world, like, literally, like, can run your offense. Got the Hawks to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, although I think that was a bit of a fluke. But once again, a little bit like Darren Fox, a little bit like Luka, I think there's a downside to building a roster around a guy where every other piece has to be so exact. And I think the Hawks are finding out sort of the hard way that you can't just mimic the Warriors, right? And I think one of the biggest things that, this has become a talking point in the NBA this year is, with the resurgence of the Warriors, is why can't other teams copy what this team does? Like, why can't the Hawks with, Trae Young and Kevin Huerter, why can't they mimic Steph and Klay? Well, it's because of the defense. Steph is a very underrated defender. He's not a great defender, but he tries really hard, and he's a good defensive rebounder. He has
long fucking hands, always has, too.
Yeah, and it's like, when you have buy-in from your star, I think that matters. So I think with the Hawks,
but Klay is elite. But Klay is elite defensively. And I think that
Was
matters too.
elite.
Oh, right. I
Was
mean, I'm
elite.
I'm talking just Warriors dynasty.
Yeah.
Like,
Of
yeah,
course. And like and Draymond is elite defensively, and Andre
yes,
Iguodala is
is
elite
elite
defensively,
defensively.
and
Sean Livingston
that's
coming off the bench is very good defensively. Like, we're talking
and
about great defenders.
exactly, and even when you're talking about Harrison Barnes, he was a 3-and-D guy for them.
Very good defensively.
Yeah, so every single piece that
See,
has
like
come into that,
HB picks and chooses when he wants to be good, and I think that's part of the fucking culture that the Kings have. It's like he looks great sometimes, and sometimes he looks like a shit player, and that's part of the
right.
issue.
No, absolutely, and I think that there's a really big part to be able to say like, okay, like there's a very big difference that what I told you about Tyrese versus De'Aaron Fox, whereas like we're talking, and that's the same thing I'll say. Tyrese Fox thing is the same thing I'll say with Trey and Luka. Is yes, they are both generational offensive players, but one of them is just a better version of what the other one does. They both take threes. They both take
But like
above the
one
break
guy is
threes. They
6'8",
both
and
dominate
like one
possessions.
guy is 6 foot. I mean, I think
Well,
that's the
exactly.
biggest distinguishing factor between those two guys. I really do.
You would think so, but if Trey Young was 6'6", Luka's 6'6.5", 6'7", 6'8", you can say he's 6'8",
Yeah,
whatever. He's
whatever.
huge, whatever. But he's also not very quick. He has my grandmother's quickness, and he crawls the pace. And you could argue if Luka Doncic was as quick as, if he was as quick as Trey Young, then we would be talking about prime Michael Jordan. Okay, like we really, it's hard to say like what one guy would do with the other guy's advantages. What I will say, however, is that the way that Luka creates space, like even with his slow as molasses feet and him being out of shape,
It's
is
his
just a little
handle.
bit more. It's
It's
his
his
handle, it's his
incredible handle.
creation, it's his footwork, it's his
Yeah.
coordination, it's his balance, it's his strength, it's how he plays angles, it's everything. Trey is, a great passer. I think they're both great passers. I think they're both great shooters. I think they're both great offensive hubs. I think one of them is just a little bit better, but I think where the real difference between the upside of the Atlanta Hawks versus the upside of the Dallas Mavericks
Defense.
comes from me is defense.
Yeah.
Whereas Trey Young is like the worst defender in the
Yeah.
world, and I think
You
Luka
can't like you
can
like
be like a bottom
right
20%.
that
Right?
and you're able to hide him
Because
just a little bit better.
yeah, because like Jason Timpf was talking about this yesterday. He was like, if Luka could get in shape, he has enough size, big wingspan, right? Luka Doncic, 6'11" wingspan, he has enough size, enough strength that he could still be like a guy who can body up like the worst big. He can provide some presence in the paint for you. There's a way to use him, but there is no way that you can offset the sheer gap that's having someone like Trey Young. There's no one you can hide him on. He's too short, right? You can't hide him in a corner. People just shoot right over him. You can't put him in the paint. People go right over him. You can't put him on the perimeter. People go right past him. So there's just like a limitation. So that's why I have Trey Young just below. So now let's just quickly buzz through tier, I think, 2, which will be Scotty, Evan, Edwards, and John Morant. Honestly, John Morant would be higher for me. John Morant would be tier 1 if it were not for the injuries. We talked about it in our last episode. I think there's a real downside. Every year he plays fewer and fewer games. The jump shot is still a bit of a concern for me, although, he's just so elite in the paint. Like we're talking 60+%. Sometimes passing, super smart, just a great playmaker. I think he doesn't get enough credit for just how smart he is as a player.
To me, it's just like his intangibles. What separates him from Fox is like both very similar players, but he just has that
Yeah.
always relentless attitude that even if you block a shot in the paint once, he's going to come back at you every time. And I don't see that enough of Fox. When you do see that Fox that does that, you're like, fuck, why don't you do it all the time? And I think that's in the persona of how you grow up, of like where you're from. And that's when I talk to you about potential versus intangibles. Like potential, like they're both fucking talented, but one guy has that separating dog factor that the other guy may or may not have it as of yet. He may never have it. Like, and that's what could separate both of their careers. I don't know. I mean, he's 24, so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, these three of these 4 players, whether it's Scotty, Edwards, John Morant, these are culture changers. Like these guys literally walk into a locker room day one, everyone's different. Everyone's different around them. the winning, the attitude towards winning, the attitude towards success. And it's very predictable that the Minnesota Timberwolves made it to the playoffs. And I don't think it's that. Look, right now, Karl-Anthony Towns is a more talented player than Anthony Edwards. He's a better player than Anthony Edwards, but he's not a more important player than Anthony Edwards, because Anthony Edwards is literally commanding that locker room, and he is the de facto guy already. I don't mean to sound like those guys on First Take, like, is this guy the guy? Is that guy the guy? I think with Edwards, it's very obvious who's deferring to who in that locker room. He's come into a situation with two All-Stars, and in his second year, he is the alpha in that room, and it's very obvious when you listen to him talk who people are looking towards as their leader going forward. I think he's just going to get better. Not convinced with the defense. Yes, he was better this year, but I'm not convinced he can be great. I don't know if but I am convinced for sure that he's better defensively than Luka or Trey or any of these guys. For sure, he's much better than LaMelo. So that's why I put him in tier 2, above guys like Trae Young, above guys like Cade, because I really do see like elite offense with passable to good defense. Evan Mobley. I mean, unicorn defensively, like a defensive unicorn with budding offensive potential, great off the court. Another, not a raw guy, not Ja Morant, not Dancing, not Edwards, the other three guys, they change your locker, and they change your locker room in a different way. I think Evan Mobley, there's like a workman-like approach to the game. There's like a shit serious, Duncan-esque. I don't want to say he's Tim Duncan. He's not going to be Tim Duncan. He's not that level of offensive player, but there's shades of somewhere between Duncan and Chris Bosh that I could see in him.
For sure.
And I think the Cleveland Cavaliers have a guy who's a cornerstone, unselfish to a fault sometimes, but very unselfish. And I think that if your top guy is coachable, which he very much is defense first, which he very much is selfless, which he very much is, has good, intangibles, is passing, has like no glaring weaknesses offensively or defensively, covers for guys, good teammate, good presence, good leader. I mean, this is just the type of guy that, you fall ass backwards in. Like, this is the type of guy you want as a number 1 pick. I think in any draft, if you were to just say carte blanche, I want the number 1 pick in the 2028 draft or 2032 draft, I hope I find Evan Mobley, So I think that he's just incredible. And number 3, Scotty Barnes. And I think this is just my homerism. If I was not a Raptor fan, I think there's no way in hell I would have Scotty in tier 2. I would probably have him below Shea. But I put him in tier 2 because I see there's I look at everything, like when I look at every contract ever signed in the NBA, I look at upside, downside, right? Every pick I look at upside, downside. And so every single time I look at it, I say, can this guy be 75% of what is what I project him to be? Can he be worse than 75% of that, right? Like, if you look at Andrew Wiggins, right? Someone like Andrew Wiggins versus Jabari Parker, you go back and you look at that draft. You're like, okay, if Andrew Wiggins busts, I have a rim-running, defensive swingman who has some offensive potential. If Jabari Parker busts, I don't know what I have in this guy. I have an inefficient scorer who can't really defend. I think there's a very different argument there. So Scotty Barnes at 75% of what I think he would be is not a tier 2 player, right? He's a tertiary scorer, excellent two-way player, helps facilitate your offense, good locker room guy, good leader, culture driver, all the intangibles, right?
Do you think Barnes can lead and be an alpha in every scenario? He seems so nice guy.
Absolutely, I do. And that's where we talk about 75% versus 125%. So my average, like what I think Scotty Barnes will be at 24. So I guess I have to defend why the hell he is as high as he is, right? I see a guy who impacts everyone around him in a way that I think is invaluable. Like whether it be his on-court, production in terms of how he finds guys, how he encourages guys, how he leads in the locker room, whether it's off-court, all that stuff. I think Scotty Barnes is a winner. I know that sounds like a cop-out because I'm like almost like boosting his intangibles in 2K like to 99 just to get his overall rating up. But I really do think with Scotty Barnes, it's just like it's clear to me, having seen guys who've been around him, having talked to people who are really close to him, that he just changes the vibe of every room he's in. He changes how hard people work. Every practice is different. If this guy's out of your practice, it's a different practice. He's in your practice, it's a completely different practice. And I think that has an organic effect, just the way Tim Duncan did, just the way Kobe did. I think that those kind of guys, they change the entire trajectory of your organization, how your team approaches success and weakness, how your team approaches being down 2-1 in a series. I think all of these things will project forward. In terms of as a player, obviously, at 24, I expect him to be a 23, 24 point per game, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, do it all type of guy, who has like some ability to space the floor, some ability to play off the ball, but I see him as a short roll threat. And I think that 15 points per game in the Raptors offense last year, as a guy who didn't have a reliable jump shot, who was a rookie, who's still adjusting to the NBA, who didn't get a ton of opportunities offensively. His usage rate was like right around 19, 20%. So I look at a guy like that and I'm like, you add a jump shot to that, 1 year of experience, and just in all the ways he attacks the ball, attacks the floor, all the smart ways, his impact is just enormous. So he might never be the kind of guy like Luka or Tatum, like the guys who are above him on this list, where he can single-handedly lead an offense for an entire quarter and score like 20 points. He might never be that guy. I don't know. A lot of people see him as a Giannis type. I think he just has way more skill than Giannis at the same age. He doesn't have the same physical potential that Giannis, but mentally, in terms of skill set, he's so much further ahead. And I don't see any reason why he wouldn't hit his upside. So I guess I'm saying, like, I just see like guys like Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes. Yes, 1 year, there's no reason that he should be seeing that type. Anthony Edwards is the same age as these guys. So how the hell are we? You know what I mean? Like, how are you putting? He reclassified. Like, he reclassified up.
I would have Scotty Barnes in tier 3.
Behind who? Behind Shea? Behind Cade?
Definitely ahead of Zion. But I would have Shea. But I would have Shea ahead of Zion. So it'd be like Shea, Trey, Scotty, Evan Mobley.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's an argument to be made. Again, we're talking about different principles. I value defense a lot. I cannot, in good conscience, put somebody who is a complete one-way player like Trae Young into a tier 2 classification. I just can't.
Well, that's why I put Shea over Trae. Like, that's why I would put Shea over Trae. Like me.
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is not a great defender either.
But he can be,
for the record. Yeah, and I mean, like, look, I want to say, like, for the record, Scotty Barnes is not a great defender either. Okay, he was not a better defender than Herb Jones. He was not anywhere near the defender that Evan Mobley was. But he can be, and it's like when projecting for defense, it's like how much has to be factored in: team success, your role, what you're asked to do. Scotty was asked to do everything. It's like if I put you, like, if I want to impact your defense, like if I want to impact how you do on defense, I'm going to change your role. Okay, the Raptors play the most complicated defense in the NBA by far. I spent like hours and hours and hours studying this a couple of days ago, looking at all of their defensive set plays. It's like ridiculous how anyone could pick this up. So much less a rookie coming in, playing 36 minutes a night, playing on offense, playing on defense, second in the league in distance traveled on defense. I think there's a really good case to be made that Scotty Barnes could be a second team all defense guy in his prime. I don't see that upside with Trae Young. I don't see that upside with most guys. So, like as we get to the next tier, I'll make an argument for why I see. Okay, so tier 1, this is the big surprise, right? Well, it's not that big a surprise because you've been flashing this fucking list the whole time.
Yep.
But it would have been a surprise if you had not been. Number 2, Luka Doncic. Number 2, Jason Tatum. And I promise I'm not just being a prisoner of the moment. And I promise, that there's no bias towards Luka in that sense. Luka is incredible. I think that I have questions about how far you can go with him dominating the ball the way that he does offensively, even though he's very efficient, even though he's super talented, even though he's probably about as good at what he's doing since any guy other than LeBron James was. I think the difference between LeBron and Luka is that LeBron was a good defender, at least in his prime.
Without
The other
question.
part of it is that LeBron was actually better offensively, in my opinion. He didn't have the same jump shot, but the offense around him functioned better because he was willing to play different paces. He was willing to push the ball. He was willing to push the ball ahead, even though he dominated the possessions as much as Luka does. He didn't dominate it quite as much as Luka does. And I think this Luka ball thing, there's an upside to it that you can keep putting defenders around him, you can put shooters around him. But at some point, if one guy is taking 70 possessions a game, that's his type of.
It's very
ridiculous.
similar to James Harden's Rockets teams, right? Where we can say that Rockets team is the greatest team to never win a championship because they took the Golden State Warriors like no team has ever challenged them before. They missed 17 threes in a row, I think. But that was the one. And without Chris Paul, like, they literally gave him every type of fit that no other team could. And we can all admit that that Warriors team was the best Warriors, second to, like, MJ's team. So that's where
I might be wrong. Yeah.
Can it be,
I might be wrong, but
close to something like that where you always fall short if you're playing that type of style of basketball?
Well, look, 20 years ago, if you had said that a team was going to win, as many championships as the Warriors did shooting threes, people would tell you it's impossible, it cannot be done, right? And then the Warriors come around and they shoot jump shots and they win, but still
that was
do
team
it on
basketball,
some level.
though.
It was, and that's kind of like, I think that's the part where a lot of the earlier talk we had about why can't the Atlanta Hawks just be the Golden State Warriors. It's because you don't have the personnel, you don't have the same star, you don't have the buy-in, you don't have the same coaching, you don't have the same tertiary pieces, the ancillary pieces around those guys. They're not the same, and I think it's the same thing with comparing Harden and Luka. I understand why the comparison exists. They're both guys who dominate the ball a lot, shoot a lot, high usage, high load. I get all of that, but the Harden Rockets played faster than the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks had the slowest pace with Luka on the court. They're the slowest team in the league, right? Which should not happen when you have, so much shooting. I think look, here's one thing I would look at in the playoffs, right? One of the things that I think we're seeing with the Golden State Warriors, there is no threat of transition when Luka's on the court. None. Which means that what can happen? If there's no threat of transition, then I can spam offensive rebounds. I can throw 3 guys every single possession at the glass because I know there's no way in hell that you're going to pass the ball up. And that's where I look at a guy like Lonzo Ball and his ability to just throw it up, even though it's not going to lead to an assist. It's that hockey assist. And Luka's unwillingness to do that and dominate possessions. I think, there was someone that I know asked Luka Doncic at a press conference once if he would ever consider more possessions with Joe and Brunson on the ball and him being more of a short roller like Draymond Green. And the minute he heard that comp to Draymond Green, his face said it all. Like, I'm not doing that shit. I need to be the center of everything. And I think that this will be a really big part of the growth of Luka Doncic going forward. Is he willing to get into shape? Is he willing to be a passable defender? And number 3, is he willing to play
roll,
either way?
though. Like, it's not easy to roll and be that efficient of a roller. It's just like doing all the little things, all the dirty things to win basketball games. That's why he laughed. He's like, "Fuck this! Like, I'm not doing those things."
Yeah, but I mean, I look at someone like Scotty Barnes, and I'm like, one of the greatest.
He does all the little things.
Exactly, but one of the greatest offensive, actions that I could think of for Scotty Barnes. Now, if you actually look at how he got his points this season, it was almost entirely from 3 things: as a rim running roller, in transition, as a spot up shooter, and off of offensive rebounds. So that's how he got his points.
Hustle.
Now, if you were to hustle and being in the right place at the right time and flashing to open spaces on the court when the defense relaxes and back cuts, Scotty Barnes basically had to generate 15 points out of pure hustle. Now, here's my question. Put the ball in Scotty Barnes' hands and let him run pick and rolls. Let him run 10 to 12 pick and rolls every single game with a decent downhill threat as a center, like even someone who can set a half-decent screen like Precious Achiuwa. And you will see his ability to see over the defense the way Luka does, his ability to throw those passes, his ability to suck in 2 defenders or just a moment of confusion, and his quick reads. I mean, he would be unstoppable in that situation. So that's what I'm saying.
But I think the difference, though, there is that, like, Scotty is not known to have that mid-range, 3-point shot yet to work. So if I'm the defense, I'm going under every time.
You exactly, and that's the next step of Scotty, right? Because there was a month where Scotty Barnes shot 39% from three. There was a month where he did
Right.
that.
Sure.
There was and on the season he was an above average mid range shooter. So you talk about mid range shooting 44%, 43%. Scotty was 38%. So if he can get himself up to 45% from mid range, I think that you can consistently make him a decent pick and roll threat. And I also believe that his downhill gravity and his ability to attack space makes it so that even if you do drop, he can still attack you. Like, so I think like there's some potential there. And then finally, number one, we've talked about Luka's deficiencies. Number one is a guy who, yes, he's not Luka on offense, and he suffers from a lot of holes, and yet he's still so damn good, right? He's still so damn good, and there's
I don't think
so
he has
far to
any
go for him.
holes. I think he's so fucking good. Like,
He is so good, but he does have holes. He's not a great passer yet. He's not great
you're right.
as a ball
That's
handler
the one
yet.
thing where he's not a good passer. That's the only hole to me
Right,
it's subjective.
but
If you say he's not a good handler, he creates his own shot however he wants
he
it.
gets ripped. He gets ripped. He's turnover prone. I mean,
Everyone gets ripped in the NBA, though. Everyone gets ripped in the NBA.
For a guy who handles as much as he does, like, can you compare his turnovers to Luka's turnovers, like live ball turnovers, in terms of a guy just throwing away a pass or just getting ripped on a drive?
But he wasn't doing that against other teams. It's just I give credit to the Heat because the Heat have an elite defense.
You get tested against good defenses. Luka is being tested right now against a good defense. Jimmy Butler is being tested against a great defense. Boston is, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are being tested against. You find out who you are against these types of defenses. And so, like, the Raptors found out who they were and who they were not against the Milwaukee Bucks in a championship run, right? That was a great defense. But the Milwaukee Bucks also found out what Giannis was not when they had to face a great defense. That's what I'm saying. Great defenses will always make you go to your third, fourth, fifth option. And I think what we're seeing is that at 24 years old, Jason Tatum still has 4 steps to go. And what I love about him is
4
that
or 2 steps?
I think he has 4 steps to go. Number one, I think a step can be as a more consistent defender, because his potential as a defender right now is like, I see him as a first team all defense staple. If he wants to be going forward, he did not make an all defense team this year. He was a very improved defender this year. I see a step up that he can take as a defender. Whereas, okay, yes, we are at a stage right now where offensive superstars kind of coast on defense a little bit. But to know that he has the potential to do what he did to Kevin Durant in that opening round, and he shut him down, blocked his shot, made life a living hell. Yes, it is a team game, but the fact that he's a major cog in that wheel, and yes, the Celtics have been missing Marcus Smart, and they've been missing Rob Williams, and there's all these parts of their team that they've missed throughout the year, and the one consistent has been Jason Tatum, and he's been incredible for them. His offensive potential as a ball handler, improving as a shooter, and improving as a passer. I mean, take those 4 steps up, and you could be talking about a top 10 all-time guy. And I don't think that's a conversation we were having about Jason Tatum 2 years ago. But 3 conference finals, no matter what happens with the Miami Heat right now, you cannot deny the fact that as a rookie, this guy led a team as its best player without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward. That team was him. That was him, right? Like, who was it? It was him and Jalen Brown. And they made a very surprise run to the Eastern Conference Finals. They did it again 2 years later in the bubble. They lost the Miami Heat, if I'm not mistaken. And now, they beat the Raptors, right? So they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. This is their 3rd trip to the Eastern Conference Finals. And he's 24 years old, and he has had this kind of success. And it's just been quiet. It's been quiet success, building up. But I like the trend line. I like what this guy can be. And I just love the fact that he is the easiest superstar that I could think of to build around, under 25, 26 years old. He's easier to build, and his injury history is clean for the most part. Shoulder aside, whatever's going on with the shoulder right now aside, he's easier to build around for me than Giannis, because he's a more complete player. He's younger. He's easier for me to build around than obviously than Luka, because he plays 2 sides, and I don't need to surround him with all these elite defenders. I can surround him with good defenders and still be an above-average defensive team because he can pull it up. I look at him like Kawhi Leonard, who got there much earlier, with hopefully no degenerative knee issues, who can actually see out the prime of Kawhi, because that steady growth that we're seeing in him, all the holes that we're talking about in his game right now are the same holes we're talking about in Kawhi's game at 24, 25. It's like, can he become a better ball handler? Can he become a more consistent shooter? Can he become a better passer? And we saw with Kawhi that they really clicked when he was 26, 27 years old. And hopefully with Tatum, it clicks sooner so that we see like a 6-7 year window. His game is not overly reliant.
Well, not hopefully for the Raptors. I mean, you don't want to see that for the Raptors.
Dude, I'm not a homer. I don't give a shit. Like, I want to see great basketball. I want to see great players actually achieve their prime. I'm not like one of those jackass fans who's like rooting for Embiid to get injured. Embiid is a great basketball player. Why the hell would I want to deprive the world of great basketball players? This is a sport that I love and cherish. I am rooting for the Boston Celtics, despite the fact that I know that the Boston Celtics are better than the Toronto Raptors and probably going to be much more primely positioned to beat the Raptors every single year for the next 5 years, behind Brown and Tatum and Smart and Rob Williams. Like, Rob Williams makes $12 million a year. Think about that. $12 million a year. He is signed. He's 24 years old. He is signed through to his prime, 27 years old, at $12 million a year. Boston's incredible. Ime Udoka is incredible. So, yeah, that concludes my list. I would put Jason Tatum number one. I realize it's a bit reactionary because what's going on right now, but I really do believe it. He's been kind of like teetering 1-2. And I think this, what's happened in the conference finals for me with Luka, him kind of flatlining a little bit, coming in out of shape. I think I prefer to build around the more solid player.
I think my last comment was that you said he's in the conversation between Luka and Giannis to build around. And I got to agree with you. Like, I don't think we were having this conversation last year. And he's really made a case to be in that conversation, whether I agree with that or not. I have to give you the respect just to even say it, and give him the respect because he's fucking earned that, and that is, tip your hat off to him. He's definitely in the conversation now. I think I would still lean Giannis and Luka, but I think it's like an inch of a difference. Like, it's not like there's a huge drop off. It's like you're just nitpicking at this point. Like, they're all so great, and I got to give them credit. Let us know in the comments below if you agree with Rob's crazy ass list. Say yes or no. A lot of you guys came out. We're 2 hours and a half in. I got a show right now with Pistons people. I think Detroit television, they're not gonna like it because I'm gonna speak volumes of Scotty Barnes, and I'm probably gonna talk some shit on Cade, but it's all good. You guys can join me there. Piston Stock YouTube channel, catch me there. It's gonna be hilarious because I'm gonna be the other guy, right? And I'm gonna pull some Rob magic over there. We'll see if I do it or not. But yeah, man. Last comments. I gotta take a fat leak, man. Like a fat leak.
Okay.
So
I'm just gonna say that I think we're finding out who Tatum is right now with the shoulder thing that he's going through. He managed to score 30 plus points in a game that was a must win. He dialed in defensively, couldn't shoot the ball from three. People who were there that I talked to who were in the game, they were like, when the cameras weren't on him, he was getting massages, he was stretching it out, he was stretching out that shoulder every single time, and he'd just go out there and he would just push through. And I think you find out who players are when you take something away from them. Like if they've got a sore knee or they're missing a teammate or they're down, like they're down that comfortable cushion, and you take away that comfort zone, how do you react? And it's like with him, it's like you're seeing so much mental toughness in this guy. I love him. I think he's a great player. And if I could build my team around any player, just no disrespect to Scotty Barnes, I'll pick Jason Tatum for sure.
There it is, y'all. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.